together today, because that's the amount of time that it's got to sit over the very warm waters here. That's the Gulf Stream right there. Once it gets north of that Gulf Stream, temperatures start dropping off into the middle 70s and even the lower 70s. So it's going to be removed from that energy source. If it has not gotten its act together, it's possible that it could stay a little bit weaker. And in fact, some of the intensity guidance indicating that it may be a tropical storm. We can hope for that. We can hope for it, but we can't count on it, not by any means. And also concern about water being pushed against the shore there as the storm comes in over several high tide cycles, because it is going to be such a long-lasting event. Let's get back out to Jim Cantore at Narragansett. And, you know, Jim, some people have made the comparison to nor'easters. You know, this is an area, a region of the country that has a lot of experience with windstorms, but usually when they're happening, the trees don't have their leaves and they don't have all kinds of water in the ground, and that makes this a really different situation.
That is a fantastic point, Carl. A couple of days ago, the guidance, a lot of it took the storm north and really slowed it on approach to Long Island, and then it kind of looped and started going out to sea. Well, that same guidance now is bringing it up inland to Connecticut and Massachusetts and eastern New York and looping it there where it's been so wet. So that's a much worse scenario in terms of the rainfall, all right? Sure, we may not get a hurricane, but we are going to get one hell of a rainmaker out of this, and that cannot be understated. And that's a fantastic point, Carl, about the leaves that are on the trees in through here, and not only they're on the trees, but they're on trees with root balls that have been sitting in water since July. It's been a very wet summer up across much of this region, so it may not take as much wind with those trees to push them over and cause power outages. If you're not preparing for power loss in these areas where we're forecasting, you know, several inches of rain, of course, even interior New England, where we're expecting winds to gust over 39 miles an hour, you know what? You're not preparing right. You need to be preparing for that, because it's almost going to be a given with this. So let's talk about Narragansett. First of all, you have at Williams Beach here, and you can see Roger Wheeler Beach, and you can see as you kind of look out and through here, there's a lot of people getting their last maybe 1 or 2 weekends in, because, you know, it's back to school after Labor Day and through here, and that's about it. And frankly, it is a beautiful day. It's in the low 80s. We got a nice breeze. There's plenty of sunshine out. And it was interesting, you know, talking to the lady earlier, Adriana, and she was talking about how, you know, look, everybody's done their prep. So they're just like, we're going to come out here and we're going to enjoy a beach day. You know, we're going to enjoy ourselves until we lose power or, you know, have to hunker down, which will be for a good time tomorrow. So there you see where we're talking about 50 to 60 mile per hour winds. It looks like some of the worst of this may come in at low tide, but given the slowing, we'll still have onshore wind at high tide. So that's going to be about 8:35 tomorrow night here, and that plays a big factor because you have about a 4-foot tidal shift, plus we have tides running astronomically high as well, and that's something to consider. We're not going to be on the super wet side of this, at least that's how it looks right now. So all that rain that's on the east side of it right now with the thunderstorms is going to have to die out for that to verify. So that's kind of a tricky forecast. But it looks like a lot of the moisture will certainly come into like New York City, northern New Jersey, up the Hudson Valley, into the Capital District, the Litchfield Hills, the Berkshires, and across the Connecticut Valley as well, where we'll see several inches of rain. And the slowness of this makes me wonder if some of these rainfall totals aren't underdone. So again, regardless of if it's a TS or hurricane, don't get caught up in that. Get caught up in the impacts that are going to be a problem for you. And certainly over the interior, that means a lot of rain and potentially just enough wind with, as Carl said, with those leaves all on the trees here to cause a lot of power outages and even some tree damage and power lines coming down. All right, guys, let's find out how they're doing out in the Hamptons this morning. Steph's at Montauk Point. And Steph, I saw your shots earlier where you're showing, you know, them kind of moving some dirt around on the beach, because you will have certainly a storm surge component there as well.
And I want to talk about that. And right now, the beach is packed. But I will say, you won't be able to go to the beach tomorrow. In fact, New York City beaches will be closed for Sunday, also into Monday. Here at the end, as they call it, Montauk is the end, because we are the farthest point out on Long Island, over 100 miles from New York City. You can see we have red flag that is flying. Those will probably change to double red flags. And look, that we have a jet ski that was just brought out by the lifeguards, and they actually just drove by us to bring another one down the beach because it is rough out there. We were talking to some beachgoers, and they were mentioning how bad it is right now. The storm 390 miles to our south. In fact, even spoke to a little kid who said, I got beat up out there. That's how bad it is. So let's talk about when we are going to see the worst of it here in Long Island and also up towards Connecticut. In Montauk specifically, it will be an all-day event. I can't emphasize that enough. It is going to be a morning, afternoon hard hitting, and then as we get into the evening hours, that's when things will start to improve, but really it's an all-day affair for us here. High tides, this is bad news. By the way, we can show you high tide. We're at low tide, 303 is low tide, but we can kind of get a gist. If you look here at the debris on the ground, this is about where your normal high tide goes. And Jim was mentioning that sand, there's that sand. They'll probably block off the beach to stop the water from flowing right into town. So that's something that we're going to be watching, and we'll be out here during the storm as well. So high tide could exacerbate the situation, seeing it is happening just after 9 tomorrow morning. We could see that surge. I mean, you're talking from Montauk to East Hampton, I should say. East Hampton, my apologies there, Southampton, also Flying Point. You're going to have issues even on the North Shore there into Sag Harbor. Long Island Sound is going to be rough as well. West Babylon, all these areas, Long Branch, we are going to see that surge come in. And the waves you see already kicking up at least 3 to 5. And if you go to those buoys farther out, we're seeing much bigger wave heights, up to 17 feet. And remember, a one-story building is about 10 feet. So 17 feet, we're nearing about a 2-story building wave heights. So that can help give you a little bit of perspective on how strong this storm is and how far the waves can propagate out from it. And it is not just us in the Northeast, the entire East Coast. We're really winding summer down here. Kids have started to go back to school, will continue to go back to school. And so if you're doing that last-minute trip to the beach, you have to watch it up and down the East Coast with those rip current threats. Jen, we're going to talk about the fact that power outages are going to be a massive issue here and how the Long Island Railroad's preparing, how they're preparing the buses, the subways, what they're doing in all these different towns to hope for the best when it comes to power outages. That's coming up.
Yeah, and prepare for the worst here, and that's what you have to do, Steph. I drove in on the Merritt Parkway here this morning, and I saw all the rest stops, a lot of families in vehicles looking like they're on vacation, right? So maybe they're heading home, maybe they're getting ready. And then I stopped at a Target, and I saw everyone getting ready, where we definitely had the shelves of water completely cleared out. A lot of food products is what people were buying, and the store was more packed, they said, than it ever is on a Saturday morning. So no doubt, I think people are thinking about this here, and as they should be, preparing for power outages, which, like Steph said, may last more than a week. That's what Eversource says, that they could be dealing with a situation where some people lose power for more than 5 to 10 days. I want to give you the lay of the land here in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and talk about the water, both coming from the sound and also from the sky. So behind me, we've got the lighthouse out there. Looking over to the sound side here at Seaside Park where I am, you can see the waves gently rolling in, some wind waves out there today. But even though this is a more protected area, we'll get busy when it comes to waves, and we'll be worried about the surge too, because we are under a storm surge warning. 2 to 4 feet is possible. Now, if we're on that western side of the circulation, it won't be as bad, but certainly, 2 to 4 feet in this area will take over the beach. But if it's near your property and you know how that surge will affect you, you could be dealing with some flooding. I want to talk about a little bit in terms of tide, because Steph mentioned that we can see where our high tide was as well. So we're going towards low tide right now, but you can see how far up at high tide today, and this is without a surge component. So even if we're not getting that push of wind water, that wind pushing the water in here, water levels are always elevated with a tropical system, so we'll see that as well. We're going to be looking at rainfall, and rainfall is going to be one of our biggest concerns. So let's talk about that for the entire tri-state. Now, here in Connecticut, we had some big rain just this previous couple days from Fred. I'm getting my weeks mixed up, but we definitely had up in Hartford flooding rain from what was Tropical Storm Fred. Now we're going to bring in bigger rainfall amounts, more widespread from Henri. So more people will be dealing with flooding and flash flooding. Flash flood watches are up, and we are under a tropical storm warning here in Bridgeport. New Haven, you just go down the road about 20 miles, you're under a hurricane warning. So the wind plus the rain will be a factor in taking down those trees. The ground is saturated in many spots, but will become more with the heavy rainfall event, and we are looking at that concern for flash flooding, as well as the concern for trees coming down because of roots perhaps being loosened in the wet soil. We'll be watching conditions go downhill tomorrow. Make sure that you are prepared, and we'll have live coverage continuing right here on the Weather Channel. We'll send it out to Felicia over in New London here. Very similar message, Felicia. It's all about being prepared and being ready to hunker down starting tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, that's right, Jen. Of course, you want to have everything done as soon as you can here in New London. We are also on the south shore of Connecticut. We are well east of Jen, though, here in New London at the Thames Port Marina, where we have been watching boaters get prepared. We've been talking to some of the locals around here who are saying, you know, they're fueling up and they're preparing for power outages, as well as here in New London, we're under a hurricane warning, a storm surge warning. We could see 3 to 5 feet, and we are also under a flash flood watch. So multiple threats here and possibly days of power outages for this area. So, of course, you want to stick with the Weather Channel. We've got continuing coverage of Henri. We are going to track Henri through the rest of this weekend. You can download our app on your TV. Existing cable and satellite subscribers can get the Weather Channel on Roku, Fire Stick, and on your smart TV for 24/7 access to the lake.
Charlie's my little sidekick when it comes to projects around the house, but she disappears on me. I can't see everything she gets into. That's why I trust Tide Hygienic Clean. It gets between fibers to remove visible and invisible dirt. If it's got to be clean.
When it comes to covering the most important issue facing us and our Earth, one day does make all the difference. Now, the Weather Channel and its innovative climate team at Pattern are connecting you every day to the most fascinating stories impacting our planet. For what's now and what's next, rely on the climate experts with the most trusted name in TV news. If it's out there, it's in here. The Weather Channel.
Welcome back to our coverage of Hurricane Henri, now a Category 1 storm, 75-mile-per-hour winds. Not incredibly well formed on satellite, but it's got the rest of today over very warm ocean waters. Forecast to be a Category 1 as it approaches Long Island and southern New England tomorrow, and then it will slow to a crawl for the next 36 hours, and that is going to mean terrifically heavy rain in areas where the ground is saturated, where there is terrain, where there is a lot of pavement. All of those factors combining to produce a significant flash flood threat in North Jersey, Southeast New York, parts of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Long Island. And we're also going to be looking at a significant wind threat, especially in what's called the right front quadrant of the storm to the north and east of that center of circulation. A lot of trees with leaves on them, of course, this time of the year, and you've got the saturated ground on top of that. That could really bring those trees down and cause widespread power outages in Long Island, Connecticut, and also into Rhode Island. So some significant impacts from this storm, regardless of whether it is a low-end hurricane or a strong tropical storm. And now more than ever, people are concerned about the potential impacts from the storm, possible extended power outages. And while a portable generator may keep a refrigerator and a few small appliances running, there are some safety issues if they are not operated properly. But there is a better way to power your home after a power outage. And Jim Cantori met with Kohler home improvement expert Ed Del Grande to see the future of home generators.
We had a record number of billion-dollar weather disasters last year, and having an emergency preparedness kit for a few days sometimes just doesn't cut it. Let's talk about adding a generator to your arsenal. Ed, there are generators And there are generators.
Yes, there are.
What's the benefit of having a generator?
Well, the big benefit, let's face it, we now live in a plugged-in society. Just about everything we use requires electricity. So your best defense is having a backup generator system.
So what are the differences?
Well, the big difference is there's a portable and a standby. The portable generators are great for things like camping and tailgating, and in a pinch, they'll run a few appliances in your house. Now, remember, with a portable one, you do have to refuel them. They run on gasoline. Right. And you also have to make sure you run it outside away from the house. So you do have to do some constant care on it throughout the event. With a standby generator, you don't have any of those concerns. These things are permanently installed to the home's electrical system. They come on automatically, and they can power up the entire house, not just a few circuits.
And being able to stay in your home and make repairs to your home, isn't that almost like having the comforts of home, even though you have to put up with that?
Absolutely. And a standby generator is like your own personal power plant in your backyard. Now, natural gas is great. It'll hook right up to your gas lines. If you don't have natural gas, you could use propane gas. And if you use propane gas, I recommend at least a 500-gallon tank.
All right, so you sold me on a standby, something like this. What's the first thing I need to do?
First thing you do, contact the local dealer. They're all over the country. They'll come down, do what's called a site visit. At the site visit, they'll locate it, see all the local codes, install it to the local codes, and they'll even service it for you. This is not a do-it-yourself project.
You lose power, you've got power now to power your house.
Absolutely.
That's a win, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
Well, Tennessee right now experiencing catastrophic flooding. I-40, we're told, shut down in both directions due to high water. That's right around mile marker 153, where more than 10 inches of rain has fallen across western Middle Tennessee just this morning. Now, the Piney Grange River at 31.8 feet. That is well over the historic crest they saw there of 20.8 feet. That was set just a couple of years ago, back in 2019. And new video into the Weather Channel right now shows just how significant the flooding is there. Here's some rescue workers there helping one family get out of waist-high waters in what was the street right in front of their home. Just a devastating situation this morning for many in Tennessee, and it's ongoing. It's not over yet. We have a flash flood emergency in place here for Dickinson, Hickman, Humphreys. This goes until 3 o'clock local time. Again, catastrophic flooding. Now you'll notice the rain has moved out of the area, but take a look at the damage here it has done. We're talking about upwards of 16 inches of rain in some areas there right around Dickinson falling in the past 24 hours. Of course, nowhere for all of that water to go. So the interstate shut down. We had multiple storm reports there, multiple high water rescues taking place as a result of this deluge coming in. Now, we do expect more rain coming through this evening as well, but we should have some time to recover between now and then, and things will start to gradually improve. And hopefully whatever rain falls on top of this can in fact be handled. But there you see it, some more rain is going to be coming in later on this evening in through Sunday. All right, make sure you stick with us for your live team coverage of Henri. Our team of meteorologists out in the field all over the Northeast preparing you ahead of the storm. Stay with us.
We're pre-positioning heavy equipment all throughout Long Island, all throughout the Hudson Valley and the Capital District region. We're preparing water rescue teams for Long Island and swift water rescue teams for the Hudson Valley and in Westchester. I am deploying, as of today, 500 National Guard we are calling out with the necessary equipment that the National Guard brings with them, high water vehicles, etc. The state police will have approximately 1,000 personnel who will be on duty in the affected areas.
And this will be certainly one of these storms where the governor, as well as you people that live inland from the coast, need to pay attention to the storm. Some of the worst impacts could be far from the coast, far from where it comes ashore. There will be impacts there, don't get me wrong, but the flood potential and the power outage potential inland into Connecticut and eastern New York is very, very high with this. Again, the 2 p.m. advisory, the next full advisory, comes in from the Hurricane Center at 5 o'clock this evening. You'll see here, again, this storm is moving a little bit faster to the north-northeast at 17 miles an hour. One of the things I think is really interesting, and Jess, if you can do this on the fly for me, take off the hurricane symbol for a second, because one of the things that we look for as meteorologists is lightning. Thank you. A lightning around the center. We don't see any of that. We don't see any of that. So, you know, you can see these bands starting to get a little bit more lightning, but something that's rapidly intensifying usually shows a little bit more lightning around the center. Either way, we're going to have, obviously, reports from the hurricane hunters as they go out and continue to investigate this thing until it basically makes landfall. But here you go. Latest track takes it up to hurricane and then back down. All right, and then that slow progression up the Hudson Valley, or east of the Hudson Valley, through the Litchfield Hills, through the Berkshires, then over through the Connecticut Valley, and then drifting across Maine. And remember, it has brought up deep tropical moisture with it, so that's going to cause the flooding problem in through there. You can see where the hurricane warnings are. They are not in New York City, all right, and they do extend out through Narragansett Bay, which is where we are on the western side of it in Narragansett. Of course, Newport is where Reynolds is on the eastern side of this as well. Again, winds will be tropical storm force, and certainly enough, given the tree canopy, given the amount of water that we had in July and so far in August, to knock a lot of these trees over and cause extensive power outages. When is that going to occur? It starts tomorrow morning, okay? Probabilities of hurricane force gusts are a lot less. They're not zero, but they're a lot less, and certainly given what we see right now, this is very, very believable that we may not see hurricane gusts at all. All right, let's get into Carl Parker here and talk a little bit about this storm. Carl, what are you noticing satellite-wise, certainly over the past hour or so with this thing?
Yeah, exactly what you said. I mean, there is a tremendous lack of deep convection near the center of the storm, and so it's really got through the rest of today to get its act together. If it does not do that, then it starts running out of warm water.
Yeah, and you know, once that happens, then we know, you know, the intensification process will only be available through ventilation, through the upper air low, but you still need that warm water. So it's almost kind of like if you don't have the engine going at the time you get to another process in the hurricane, it's kind of hard to crank it up pretty well here. So that's what we're going to see. Either way, Carl, we have to focus on the impacts. Regardless of a similar jog to the left, potentially, this is no Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy. No. By any stretch of the imagination. You mentioned, I thought you made a great point earlier talking about the leaf and the tree canopy being so lush. Okay, so not only are the leaves on the trees, but you've got water in the tree limbs, which makes it very, you know, bendable and certainly susceptible to being blown over. So we just have all the excuses in the world here to lose power.
Yeah, so much water in the ground over the last several weeks here, so that is definitely going to be a factor in power outages. So let's take a look at some of the latest on the storm right now. And again, from a satellite perspective, it is not very well formed right now. So it's got the rest of today. It's a Category 1 storm, 75-mile-per-hour storm. It's got the rest of today to travel over warm water. It is possible that it will become more well-formed in that period through the rest of today. But then beyond that, it gets over much, much cooler water. And so that certainly could have an impact on the ultimate intensity of the storm. And, you know, if it were to be a weaker storm, well, then you would bring down some of the impacts just a bit. But one of the main things that we're watching is the fact that it slows down so much. And regardless of what the intensity is, we're going to be looking at a serious windstorm that's capable of widespread power outages. We're going to be looking at a surge threat. Of course, some of that will be lessened depending on the intensity, or increased depending on the intensity of the storm. But again, one of the main things that we are watching now is this heavy rain potential. That is going to be huge. That's not going to change. Regardless of what the storm is, this thing is going to be a catastrophic rainmaker in some areas. We'll have much more on that coming up.
And beaches on Long Island looking a little emptier than you might expect for the middle of August. This was last evening, the waves kicking up as Hurricane Henri inches closer to the northeast coast. Off the sand, people taking the storm very seriously, you know, cleaning storm drains, checking those limbs, and securing boats. And it's not just the people. Also, the trains, the buses, the subway, Long Island Railroad, and Metro North, they are actually strategically deploying maintenance personnel, emergency equipment. When it comes to the subways, they're actually staging crews to monitor the response to make sure if there are flood-prone locations, they can clean those up quickly. They're preparing crews for debris trains, so they are on it. The buses as well, flood-prone routes are going to receive extra monitoring. So everyone is getting prepared for the system, which, by the way, is about 390 miles to the south. Notice the cloud cover. If you've been watching the Weather Channel all day, the clouds have started to encroach here on Long Island. The other thing is low tide 3:03 today, but look how high the tide can get. You can see the debris line down the beach, and you can actually see how packed the beaches are today, but they are actually closed. The beaches will be closed as we head over the next couple of days. Now, it's not just the beaches. Remember, the water's going to run up, and they're actually going to try to close off the beach with this sand that they have here. They'll do that later today. But then look at all the power lines and the trees that we have in this area. We have American holly, black oak, American beech trees. Notice no palm trees here, and they're all leafed out. Palm trees are in the tropics because of tropical entities, tall, skinny trees. They don't have loads of leaves, but we've got that air and a lot of exposed power lines. So we are concerned about power outages. And the power company for Long Island, serving Long Island, says it could be 7 to 10 days without power, worst case scenario. Local officials aren't happy about that, but that is what they are saying. It could be up to 7 to 10 days, so do keep that in mind. If you have a generator, make sure it's far away from your home. We don't need any deaths from all the exhaust coming off of those generators. Candles are actually a no-no. A lot of people go right to the candles, but so many house fires start that way. I've been on so many hurricanes, all of a sudden a house fire starts. Like, where'd that come from? You have to worry about the candles, and you want to stay away from those down power lines for obvious reasons because you don't know if they're live or not. So when is it going to come? Tomorrow morning is when it's going to start. It will go downhill as we head into the afternoon hours, and the system actually slows a bit as it comes on shore here. And so it's going to be a long duration event, an all-day event. So what I think you should be doing now, make sure you bathe the kids tonight. Sometimes we skip it on the weekends, and if it's summer, they need to take a bath because if you lose power, you lose the heating of the water. So bath showers for the entire family. Cook a nice hot meal this evening. Maybe do laundry. Because, Jen, if people are out of power for a week, you forget, like, oh, I have plenty of towels, and then 7, 8 days later, you're like, okay, these towels are kind of grimy. So I say, you know, stay home, get everything clean, get yourselves clean, and be prepared.
And Steph, that's the exact advice here in Connecticut, too. I mean, we need to prepare for power outages here. They could be lengthy here. Eversource, the power provider, is saying that across New England, we could have anywhere from 5 to 10-day power outages for 50% of its customers. That's what they're estimating based on what they see. The wind, the rain, all going to be big factors. So it is all about being prepared. I want to actually talk with the family that's on the beach here today about getting prepared for a storm like this. We've got Eric Marco and his sons with us, Evan and Dustin. So you guys are out here just enjoying one last day before we have to deal with Henri.
That's right. We're just trying to soak it in before it hits us.
Yeah, no. So, Evan, I was talking to you. So tell me what you know about this hurricane coming.
That it's going to be bad.
You think it's going to be bad? And Dustin, what are you worried about? Are you worried about that we might lose power?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like when I don't have my fan at night.
Your fan at night.
It's got the good noise.
That's a really good point, Dustin, because temperatures are going to get hot next week. And Evan, are you going to school next week?
Yep.
First day?
Yep.
Yep. So there's the chance that we don't have power, and that is definitely, I know, a big concern for a lot of parents, that we're going into the first week of school here. Temperatures are heating up. You might not have air conditioning, too, which is another big factor. Eric, what other problems do you think, though, you personally could deal with? You're from Fairfield, right, in Connecticut?
Yes, yep. We've had trouble in the past with some water getting into the house. So we have, there's self-inflating sandbags that we lay out in front of our garage, and when water hits them, they inflate and keep any more water coming in.
Have you tested them before?
Have not tested them. I've seen the videos and fingers crossed.
Yeah, no, I think that's really innovative, yeah, and I hope that it works. In terms of storms, even just general thunderstorms, though, we know can cause flooding, and so that's a big concern, that we've got inches of rain coming in here. Just recently you had some problems, right?
We did, yeah, and our street got so bad that Evan was able to paddleboard right down the middle of the road.
Yeah, and that just happened for a couple of inches of rain.
Yes.
And that's exactly what you could get from Henri here, Hurricane Henri. Tomorrow is the day to hunker down. What are you guys doing tomorrow?
Video games if the power's on, maybe a couple movies.
Yeah, charging up everything, right?
We will.
Yeah, hot meal tonight, as Stephanie just said, actually, and I think that's a great advice here because you might be grilling and doing other things. until then. All right, Eric, Marco, Evan, and Dustin, thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Hurricane Henri making its approach through the day tomorrow. And as the governor of Connecticut, Ned Lamont, said, be ready to hunker down, to shelter in place throughout the duration of this storm. Conditions really go downhill starting tomorrow afternoon, continuing through the evening, the overnight, even through Monday morning. And I think Monday morning is not going to be a commute really that anyone is going to be thinking about. It's more going to be sitting tight. Hopefully you have power so that you can work remotely. All right, we'll have continuing coverage right here on the Weather Channel, analyzing all the latest information on Hurricane Henri.
Tired of
Welcome back to our coverage of Hurricane Henri. Now, Category 1, 75-mile-per-hour winds. As you look at the satellite picture, you see that it is, to be honest with you, really struggling right now. There's not a lot in the way of deep convection near that center. It's being sheared. There's likely some dry air getting into the circulation as well. One of the big questions is what will happen over the next 12 hours while it is still over warm water. Some of the modeling indicating that it will deepen or get stronger, and it's expected to be a Category 1 hurricane as it approaches tomorrow morning, but it's possible that it will be weaker than that. And that certainly has impacts in terms of the wind and surge threat. Major surge threat here across Long Island Sound, and into southern New England as well. 3 to 5 feet. That's a life-threatening level of storm surge. Notice the high tide tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock in the morning at Montauk, and then in the evening, 9 o'clock or so, 9:43, we're going to be looking at an onshore flow there in Long Island and across southern parts of New England. And we want to get out to Jim Cantori now. He's been reporting on the storm from Rhode Island. And, Jim, certainly that would change, what we would see in terms of wind and surge if we did see a weaker storm. But what is not going to change is this potential for a catastrophic rainfall flooding event in areas where we've had so much rain in recent weeks.
Absolutely. It's so easy to focus on the coast. It's where we're spread out. It's where we should be spread out now because we're going to show you the storm coming in. But then quickly we will watch this area, especially into interior New England, into the Berkshires, into the Litchfield Hills of Connecticut, into the Hudson Valley, that could easily be just soaked with inches of rain with a storm that's slowing down. And, it's interesting, Carl, we're talking about yet another storm that's slowing down. I mean, how much longer is this trend going to continue? Let's get into some of these cities here. And some of the specifics on them. Now, remember, the timing on this that we're just forecasting for is Sunday into early Monday. So it's really going to be kind of the main hit of the storm. But in places like Boston, for example, Sunday evening's your best shot at 35-plus mile-an-hour winds. Rain to come less than an inch, but there could be more after that through Tuesday because the storm is going to ooze its way to the west and then come east. So there could easily be more than that even after that. Winds will be, again, out of the northeast with the storm going to our west, and then they'll change a little bit more easterly. That's going to be the forecast for a lot of these areas. Places like Providence, Rhode Island, just up the road on the top of the bay. We're talking about Sunday, early Monday for the 30-mile-an-hour gust. 50 by the time we get into Sunday night, less than an inch. And right now, per guidance, eastern New England isn't on the super wet side of the storm. It seems like the moisture really wants to funnel back to the west with the trajectory of that upper air low. And that's going to be interesting to watch how that evolves. Nantucket, I think you'll be 50 mile-an-hours by the time we roll into midday Sunday, and certainly less than an inch of rain. You can see that's kind of pointed out on the rain graphics in through here. A lot of this is going to be more interior western New England, eastern New York, the Catskills, again, down into northern New Jersey, into the Hamburg Mountains, where we are going to get one heck of a soaking in through here. Not to mention probably enough wind to cause the power outages. So that's something to watch. All right, guys, let's go to New London, Connecticut. Felicia Combs. And Felicia, I'm not familiar with how New London lays out, but what part of that area is most vulnerable, if you will, open to the ocean and the surge?
So, Jim, New London is actually on the Thames River, so you can kind of see it behind me here. New London is on the west side of the Thames River, and across the river here, because we're on the river right now, is Groton, which is actually a bit more flood prone than even this side of the river. And then what happens is the Thames River flows out to the Long Island Sound, which of course then opens to the Atlantic. So the marina that we're at, the Thamesport Marina, is actually kind of the first stop on the Thames River out of the Sound. So this is actually one of the more vulnerable marinas to what we're going to be dealing with. So in terms of the rainfall still to come, as Jim was showing us, most of that rainfall, the heavy rainfall, is going to be west. It's been a beautiful day here in New London so far today, but what's going to happen is those winds are going to start to pick up as we move through the day. Sunday morning, we'll have that wind already picking up, but really Sunday afternoon and evening. And then we're going to get into the onshore flow as we head into the second part of Sunday, and that is going to be happening during high tide. So that could cause some issues, certainly, especially as we're looking at that high tide Sunday night. We spoke with one woman who has been evacuated before, and she's actually, no, we'll save that for coming up. And you can see that we do have that rain that's going to be continuing to move through as we take a look at the forecast here. Waves of heavy rain as we move through your Sunday. So I really think this is going to be a two-parter here. We're going to have that rain starting initially, and you're going to have the offshore flow. And then the rain might not be as big of the story later on, but the wind will continue to pick up. The onshore flow is going to pick up, and then we're really worried about that storm surge because you have that compounding of hours of onshore flow as we get into the later part of your Sunday, overnight, and then of course with the full moon as well. So stick with the Weather Channel. We've got you covered. You can download our app on your Roku TV and watch all of our latest updates.
And tonight's winning numbers are 18.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. The Weather Channel, of course, tracking Hurricane Henri all weekend long. I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori here in Narragansett, Rhode Island here. They don't call it the Ocean State for nothing. We got plenty of ocean out there, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to talk about how that ocean is going to impact this area in just a moment. But we've got crews stationed all over New England. Stephanie Abrams is in Montauk Point. They're going to definitely deal with some active weather. Jen Carfagna, she is in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They're going to get it there. Interstate 91, Interstate 95, they kind of get together near New Haven and Bridgeport. Felicia Combs in beautiful New London, Connecticut, talking about how the river meets the ocean there. We'll get a live update from her in just a moment and talk about impacts in all of our areas, and not only where they are and where we are, but also areas inland, because this is potentially more important inland than it is even on the coast. There'll be impacts here, but there'll be impacts potentially of epic proportions, certainly inland, with the kind of rain we could get. All right, so let's give you the nuts and bolts on this. We've got hurricane warnings out, Long Island, Connecticut, some interior counties, over through about half of Narragansett Bay, including Newport, which is on the other side of the bay, and through here, tropical storm warnings, including New York and the Cape, bookend this. We are also under a storm surge warning. We're expecting 3 to 5 feet of storm surge in through here come tomorrow afternoon, even though some of the worst of this could come in at low tide. But either way, remember, that storm surge forecast represents a worst-case scenario, all right? How high is the water going to be above the ground? And that's what that basically is looking at. Tropical storm force winds, probabilities are very high, not only on the coast but also inland. When does that start? Really starts to crank up. Certainly tomorrow morning is when we're going to see that. Probability of hurricane winds not as high, because we do think that this system will weaken and not have as much probability of staying a hurricane or even becoming one, you know, once it gets north, if you will, or just south of Long Island. So right now it's got 75-mile-an-hour winds with it, but that seems to be a stretch. Carl, I wanted to ask you, as we bring in our hurricane specialist, Carl Parker, and talk a little bit about Hurricane Hunter aircraft. What is their schedule looking like? Are they going to put another high altitude aircraft out and through here and kind of look at the surrounding atmosphere that surrounds Henri?
Yeah, I believe they are, Jim. I'm going to have to check on that. I believe they're going out this afternoon to do that. But certainly they've been doing a lot of that. They did plenty of those flights last night.
Yes.
A couple of NOAA planes were in there, and they're trying to get a really good sense of the atmosphere and how this upper low is going to evolve, because that is going to be critical. I think the upper low has been more detrimental up till this point, and so the question is what is going to happen going forward here. We're going to talk a little bit more about intensity here in just a second. So let's give you the latest on the storm, and here is what we know right now. The storm is a Category 1 hurricane. New York has issued now a state of emergency. 500 National Guards people have been deployed, and that is a state of emergency for Long Island, New York City, and other areas. The New York Metropolitan Transit Authority deploying added personnel and pre-positioning essential backup equipment across railroads, subways, bridges, and tunnels. Long Island Railroad adding an extra train leaving for Montauk this afternoon, along with 3 others already scheduled. And FEMA reminding people who experience power outages to keep those generators outdoors. All right, let's talk about some of the forecast issues that we're looking at right now. So the forecast has not changed that much in the last day or so. Still expected to be a Category 1 hurricane as it is moving in tomorrow morning. Still generally taking aim on Long Island and southern New England. It's still going to slow down tremendously. That's going to be a huge part of the story that is going to amplify the potential for exceptionally heavy rain, as well as a prolonged period of wind. Now, you look at the National Hurricane Center forecast. Notice here we just got the new ensemble information from the American model, the GFS model, and you notice that a lot of these ensembles, what we were looking at earlier today, was a spread that was really on either side of this track. Now there are fewer members pointing towards New York and more members a little farther to the east. So for a couple of days, we saw the trend move west, west, west. Then it started to come back a little bit towards the east. Now, at least with this American model ensemble run, even more of a trend to the east, but still generally taking aim on Long Island as well as southern New England. Maybe, however, some increased risk of impacts, say, in the Boston area. Now, here's a high-resolution model forecast. You notice the storm trucking right along here, then starts to come in tomorrow morning. That's when the winds really pick up tomorrow morning in Montauk, in Rhode Island, Connecticut. I want you to notice the structure of the storm. So there's the center. A lot of the weather is on the west side of the storm. Sometimes we talk about the right front quadrant of a hurricane. In this case, it's on the west side, and for that reason, as the storm comes in, areas to the west could get hit very hard, and then, of course, the storm just slows down that last little bit of the loop there, that representing 36 hours as this thing is just crawling across the region. And so we could be talking about really catastrophic rainfall in urban areas, in high terrain, and in areas where the water is, or the ground is saturated. It's full of water because we've seen so much rain in recent weeks here. So flash flooding likely across the tri-state area and farther out to the north and west. Now, looking at the the visible satellite picture, we see a well-defined core right there. What it is lacking right now is really deep convection, a lot of tall thunderstorms. You're just not seeing that right now, and that is because there's this upper low that is off to the west, and that is driving wind across the center of circulation. So it's being sheared. So for now, it is not helping the circulation. The thinking is that eventually that shear is going to back off. That will give it more of a chance to organize. But the other thing is that it's going to be over warm water through the rest of tonight. But then going into early tomorrow morning, it starts getting out over this cooler water. So if it is not organized much better by that time, that could mean that it could be a weaker system. That having been said, it is going to produce heavy rain no matter what. Let's get back out to Jim Cantori. And Jim, you know, we can hope that if we see this weakened structure, maybe a little bit less in the way of wind or surge impact, but that rain story, that doesn't change. That's going to be what it is no matter what, and it could be catastrophic in some areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 things I want to point out from your excellent discussion, Carl. Number one, not only has the shear kind of pushed it a little bit this morning, but we've also seen dry air come in. So
Yes.
now the system has to take a little time and erode that away before it starts getting the core back organized.
Yeah.
And again, so the bottom line is we're running out of time. The other thing, I want to bring back that ensemble graphic that you showed.
Sure.
And again, that eastward shift a little bit. But look at how many of the members take it north, then just slide it west into eastern New York. There's a tremendous amount of consolidation there, and then come back across New England.
Yes.
So the time it's going to take for that remnant, whatever it looks like and whatever it is, like you said, it has the potential to produce catastrophic flooding.
Yeah, and that's one thing that this model, we have what's called the IBM graph model, replaced the RPM model. This model doing, I think, a really good job of representing that. So, there you see the storm coming in.
Yeah.
Now, this next period that the model is showing, this is a full 36 hours. So it's moving into Long Island Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning. Then we go into Sunday evening. It's moved over towards the Hudson Valley. Monday morning has not moved at all. Monday evening, just then starting to come up into Western Mass. That's an incredibly long period of time. And this,
Yes.
by the way, is something that we have seen more of in recent years. Jim Costin, a great researcher out of the University of Wisconsin, he found that the forward speed of landfalling tropical cyclones has decreased by about 16% since 1949 in North America. And, that's about temperature and pressure gradients. You increase the temperatures at high latitudes, you reduce those gradients, and you don't have as much wind to push storms along.
And the problem is, not only are we slowing them down, but we got more water in the atmosphere that we got to squeeze out.
Absolutely.
So that's just a double problem right there. And that's the problem that we're going to be facing here in the Northeast as we go through the next couple of days. Thank you, Carl. Always a great time talking to you about this. I wanted to kind of take you back here, show you a couple of things. You can see where the last high tide came up, because this is where the debris, what we call a debris line, is. All right. Also, just kind of looking out here, notice how the swell is starting to come in now. So just this nice rolling wave just starting to build up. And this is all from Henri. And then looking up into the sky, Brad, you can see how the cloud cover is also starting to thicken up a little bit toward the south. So signs certainly of Henri's approach. We'll start getting into some of the tropical storm force winds probably tomorrow. Maybe our worst winds around midday, and maybe this will be the time where we maximize the storm surge too, all right, with this coming ashore. If that happens, it'll be closer to low tide than high tide. But then the slow movement, the onshore flow, will probably create some more issues tomorrow night at high tide, which is 8:36 here. So, this is probably going to be a multiple tide cycle issue. We don't seem to be, from what we're looking at on the wet side of this storm, a lot of that wetness is west, like New York City and the Litchfield Hills, the Berkshires, perhaps potentially all the way into the southeast Adirondacks, the Capital District, and then back across interior New England and through here. So that's what we'll be looking at. But there will be impacts, okay? Whether we get the worst impacts on the coast is certainly yet to be determined, but they're planning on it. And they're planning on it, too, if you take trains like they do on Long Island. Let's get down to Stephanie, who's in Montauk, Stephanie Abrams. And, Steph, they're already starting to kind of tweak the train schedules a little bit, I understand.
Yeah, they are. So Long Island Railroad actually was just tweeting that they're suspending service on Montauk Branch to and from Greenport following today's last regularly scheduled departures. Sunday, they're not going to run until they check the infrastructure. So if you're thinking of getting out tonight, you've got to leave Montauk by 7:35. That's the last train. North Fork, Greenpoint, 9:03 p.m. Tomorrow, who knows when? They're probably not going to run tomorrow with all the weather that's going on, is my guess. And then we don't know what will happen on Monday. Let's talk more about the infrastructure in this town here in Montauk. Peter Van Scoip is the supervisor of East Hampton. Peter, thanks for being with us. I want to talk about this mound of sand behind us here, because you guys are going to have to do a dance between the rainwater and drainage versus the surge coming up. That sounds very tricky.
It could be tricky. We're required under the operation manual from the Army Corps of Engineers to plug this road end when there is storm surge of a certain height. So we'll be doing that ahead of the storm, and then we'll be monitoring the rainfall to see at which point we might open this back up in order to let rainfall, stormwater run back out into the ocean.
How concerned are you about these big, beautiful dunes that you guys have here all along the beach?
So we are very concerned about the loss of sand to erosion. We have problems during the winter time and we lose a lot of sand. We do an annual replenishment here until we get a larger project. And so that's a lot of concern right now, because it's still height of the season. You know, you can look around and see how many people are enjoying the beach today. Obviously, we don't want them on the beach tomorrow. It's going to be dangerous. Stay out of the water. But, you know, this is part of what drives our economy and part of what we all love.
What is your biggest concern for the residents and visitors that are here?
Well, of course, my primary concern is for everyone's safety. We want everybody to stay safe, stay indoors during the storm. Don't go out. There's flying debris. There's going to be wires down, trees down, and we'll have crews out dealing with that. Emergency, you know, preparedness team has been activated. It's all hands on deck now until this thing's over.
All right, Peter, we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
And, you know, this is actually the third Atlantic hurricane season, third Atlantic storm we've seen this season. And Jen, we're actually ahead of schedule. We're ahead of schedule on naming. The H storm shouldn't happen until about September 24th. And if you look at the long-term average, the third Atlantic hurricane usually forms September 6th. So we're ahead of season. A lot of people out here, remember the population, it doubles or triples out here on the island. So a lot of people maybe not familiar, you know, with what to do during the storm.
And also this, I mean, this is the last blast for a lot of kids to have some fun for going back to school, for parents as well, right? So they're trying to take advantage of the weekend. That's what we've seen here actually in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I am at Seaside Park, which is popular, and it was actually a little more crowded a couple of hours ago when I first arrived. I think it's thinning out a little bit, maybe people getting home and just making sure they have everything prepared for what's to come. Let me give you the lay of the land. I want to actually take you down the beach to the lighthouse, which is out there. And so, you know, I'm on the Sound side, the Long Island Sound side. On the other side, we've got the Black Rock Harbor. That's a little more protected over there, but certainly storm surge is going to be a factor in both of these areas. Now, we're under storm surge warning. We are expecting 2 to 4 feet of surge here. When you look at the beach and the way it is, we're at low tide, or we're heading towards low tide right now, actually, so it's still going out. Low tide is about at 5 o'clock, and that'd be the timing for tomorrow too-ish. So as we, you know, think about if we're getting an approach from Henri at this time at low tide, look how far out the water is. You know, surge may not end up being the biggest concern. It actually will be the wind and the flooding rainfall here, and I think the power outages, which we need to prepare for. As you look out beyond the beach, you can see some people in the water, less than there was earlier. And I bring that point up because I think everyone really needs to think tonight about making sure that they are ready for what is to come. We are anticipating widespread power outages. Eversource has been saying that this is the type of event that for them, they consider it a level 3 type event. They're asking people to do their part to make sure that we don't have more power outages than we need to have, right? To make sure that your patio furniture is all secured, your trampolines, they are secured. Anything that could fly up and become a projectile and potentially take out power lines, right? So that's this kind of thing you need to do today, and you also need to make sure you are ready to go maybe a week or more without power, have the water, have the batteries, make sure that you have some food actually that you don't necessarily have to cook, or have propane for your grill so that you could grill if necessary. All right, let's go back over to Felicia in New London, Connecticut. And Felicia, the rain there and the heavy rain and flooding concerns are also sort of a similar message as we have here.
Yeah, definitely, Jen. All of the coast of Connecticut, there along the Long Island Sound, certainly many of the same messages that we're echoing. The storm surge is going to be a big issue, especially with the full moon and the high tides, with us having an onshore wind that we're going to be dealing with. Of course, the rain as well, and then the power outages. So I will say today is kind of your day to finish getting ready here in New London. By tomorrow morning, you will be dealing with those bands of rain, and those winds will continue to pick up throughout the day on Sunday as well. Of course, we are all bracing for Henri as conditions continue to deteriorate as we head through your Sunday morning. So if you're trying to get anything squared away, today's your day to do it. We're back after the break.
When it comes to covering the most important issue facing us and our Earth, one day does make all the difference. Now, the Weather Channel and its innovative climate team at Pattern are connecting you every day to the most fascinating stories impacting our planet. For what's now and what's next, rely on the climate experts with the most trusted name in TV news. If it's out there, it's in here. The Weather Channel.
Welcome back. Rhode Island Governor Dan McKee is holding a press briefing on Hurricane Henri. Let's go ahead and listen in.
That's good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Lieutenant Governor Matos, Emergency Management Director Mark Pappas, and our team to update the Rhode Islanders on a Hurricane Henri and the state around-the-clock effort to ensure we are prepared. So it has moved to a Hurricane 1 status. Just a quick note of thanks to all of you for your patience, and as we shifted the time to today's press conference, I just got off a call with President Biden, with other Northeast governors, where I provided an update to the President on where things stand in Rhode Island. I also took the opportunity to ask the President for his continued support and resources to our state, not only during the hurricane, but also in the days and weeks afterwards as we deal with the cleanup. We also took I took the opportunity after talking to some people on the coast, especially in the Westerly area, that were really impacted by Hurricane Sandy, to make a point to the President that not only do we need help during the hurricane, but also as we recover from the hurricane, and in particular to the people on the coast with the small businesses that will need help, along with every resident in the state of Rhode Island that will be impacted. As of this morning, the storm has officially strengthened to a Category 1 hurricane. I want Rhode Islanders to really hear that. We are now preparing for a Category 1 hurricane. We know that all of Rhode Island has seen a hurricane like this since land reached land 30 years ago. So we consider this a serious matter, and we want everybody in the state of Rhode Island to consider it serious as well. While the hurricane has shifted west, Rhode Island is still in the track to receive significant impacts from this storm. So what does this mean? It means that starting tomorrow, Rhode Island is expected to see damaging winds, significant flooding, storm surge, and extended power surges. Many outages are going to be realized. People are going to be without electricity. Right now, our emergency management team, the National Guard, State Police, Rhode Island Red Cross, and the National Grid, and many partners are moving forward full speed ahead to put Rhode Island in the best possible position during this hurricane and after the hurricane. Together, we are mobilized. We have resources in place, and we are in constant contact with federal partners, including the White House, FEMA, and the Coast Guard. Along with all our municipal leaders, we had a call again with all our municipal leaders and first responders that represent each one of our 39 cities and towns earlier today. Another important note, the American Red Cross will be opening 5 regional shelters beginning tonight at 8 p.m. The list is as follows: the Providence Career and Tech, Pilgrim High School in Warwick, South Kingstown High School, McCourt Middle School in Cumberland, and that's a shift from the high school, so that's a point to be made for people in that area, my hometown. It's going to McCourt Middle School, and Gaudette Middle School in Middletown. The shelters will be open to all individuals needing a safe place to shelter from the storm. Water and food will be provided. Masks will be required in the shelter at all times, and COVID-19 precautions will be closely followed. Masks will be required at all times in these shelters. My message to you, Rhode Island, is that now is the time to prepare. I know the weather is nice today. I know it's a Saturday. But we need everyone to take the time now to be ready to stay home tomorrow when conditions worsen. Get your family prepared. Check in on grandparents and older adults. Make sure they have everything that they need today. We have time to prepare, and we need to use it wisely. The best thing that you can do for you and your family, beginning at midnight tonight, is stay home through Monday morning. We urge you to stay home and stay safe. Here's what should be on your checklist. Secure your home, bring in lawn furniture, get supplies like extra food and water, charge your phones, your laptops, and other electronic devices. Prepare emergency power.
And that was the governor of Rhode Island updating for all the multiple threats that are going to be coming to that state from Henri. Of course, not just Rhode Island, though. I'm coming to you from New London, Connecticut, where we are under a hurricane warning and a storm surge warning. I'm at the Thames Sport Marina, where you'll notice that many of the boats behind me. This is the first marina as you come out of the Long Island Sound and up the Thames Marina. This is actually one of the more vulnerable marinas because you are so close to the Sound, which of course is closer to the Atlantic. As you head farther up the river, of course, you head farther inland and you get a little bit more protection there. But nonetheless, a lot of these marinas have become full with boats seeking safe harbor. So this marina has actually received a lot of calls from boaters trying to find somewhere for safe harbor. Let's talk about the forecast with Henri here in New London, across New England, because it has been about a decade since we've been dealing with a threat from a hurricane in this area. You can see the rainfall forecast. Now, there is a flash flood watch in effect here, but I don't think it's going to be the freshwater, the rainfall flooding that's going to be the biggest deal, especially along the southern coast of Connecticut. As you look farther west, places like New Haven, Torrington, though, you can see some higher amounts adding up there, the western portions of Long Island as well. Now, currently it's been a beautiful day here in New London. Absolutely no excuse to not get out and get some of those extra batteries, get some water, make sure you have your medication, all of those things that you might need if the power is out and you can't get out and about for a few days. In New London, we are going to be experiencing high tide along with onshore winds, and that is part of the problem. It's not just the high tide, it's also the fact that it's being impacted by the astronomical tides, the fact that we're going to have a full moon. So the high tide that I'm particularly worried about for the most part would be the ones late Sunday, because that's when we're really going to have those onshore winds here in places like New London, in Groton, all along the south shore of Connecticut. It's really late Sunday where we have the onshore winds. Now, the winds will begin to pick up, but they won't be onshore until later in the day. We also are going to have that rain moving through as well. The future radar does show starting by Sunday morning, we've got waves of rain, heavy rain at times moving through, and then we're going to have those waves of rain until Henri finally pulls away. So it's not going to be a short duration thing here. It's going to be taking up pretty much your entire day of Sunday with something happening. The forecast here for the storm surge where we are in New London is about 3 to 5 feet. Now, we did speak with people earlier. We saw people getting out, stocking up, fueling up on all of those different things that they might need. Of course, you want to make sure you have the gas. You want to make sure that you are getting ready. And a lot of people are preparing. We spoke with someone who was getting prepared for Henri earlier.
I would say that we don't see them that often in New England, and when we do, there's a lot of hysteria, as you could probably see. Grocery store shelves are likely empty. Gas station lines are pretty long. There's just a lot of chaos, and everybody just trying to prepare and do the best we can. Likely won't have power for a few days, so people are just stocking up.
And you know, I'd love to hear that more than I like to hear, oh, people aren't really worried about it, because we want people to be prepared. Of course, we tell you to, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And if you do happen to be without, say, without power for a few days, you don't want to be unprepared for that. That is for sure, especially if it happens for some of those low-lying areas. Now, just across the river, just across the Thames River behind me is Groton, and some of the more low-lying areas of Groton have been a voluntary evacuation because those are flood-prone places. So, Carl, you know, it's really going to depend on where you are. Not everyone is being asked to evacuate, and they're still voluntary at this point. But if you know you live in an area in, say, Groton, and it floods pretty easily, and you're being part of that voluntary evacuation, probably a good idea to go ahead and go. It's never fun to be stuck there for days and days waiting for that water to recede.
Yeah, and so much rain's going to be coming down, and water's going to be trying to run back out to the ocean as well, and that's going to also add to those water levels. Felicia, thank you so much. Well, a storm surge warning has been issued for Long Island eastward from Mastic Beach to Montauk, and storm specialist Dr. Greg Postel shows us just how dangerous surge can be.
As Hurricane Henri approaches the northeast coast, one of the most significant impacts will be storm surge. As such, the National Hurricane Center has put out storm surge watches and warnings for parts of the New England coast and nearby areas of Long Island for the possibility of life-threatening inundation. The amount of water rise above normally dry ground could exceed 1 to 3 feet in coastal Jersey, that much in western Long Island, and even more as we head into parts of eastern Long Island, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Now let's zoom in to LaGuardia Airport. Now, it is possible with some of their simulations that we could see as much as 5 to 6 feet of water rise in and around LaGuardia, inundating the runways and some of those surrounding communities. But let's now take a look at what that really means to you in sort of an everyday sense. Let's bring that water up to 3 feet. Well, 3 feet of water that can knock you off your feet, carry a car away. Who knows what is hiding or moving around in this water. Very dangerous. But there is going to be some chance that we see water rises perhaps 5 or 6 feet with the storm surge of Henri. This is above my head and definitely life-threatening. You're going to want to be prepared for that kind of inundation, so stay tuned to all the latest updates from the National Hurricane Center. And of course, as always, stay safe, everyone.
All right, thank you very much for that, Greg. And right now, the hurricane hunters are on their way, flying out to the storm. It's going to be very interesting to see what they find, as the storm has certainly been under pressure from shear over the last several hours here. Here's a look at where they are right now. They took off from Biloxi, and they're on their way out towards the center of circulation, so they should be getting there within the next hour or so. And we are really looking forward to that information that we see from them. Right now, it's 75-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane moving north-northeast at 17 miles per hour. As you can see from the satellite imagery, it is not terribly well formed right around that core there. There's been some stronger wind than I believe was anticipated. However, it is going to have an opportunity to become more well-defined, and we're expecting now a hurricane to be coming in to the coast tomorrow morning. And that's going to continue to slowly work on shore, and that slow forward speed, that is everything. That is huge. By the time it starts coming onshore in Long Island, it's going to take another 36 hours for the storm to make its way up into western Mass and into Vermont. And that very slow motion is going to amplify the rainfall threat. You've got the ground that is full of water because of all kinds of rain in recent weeks. You've got a lot of urban areas, and runoff is much higher in those areas. And then you've got a lot of terrain on top of that. So we could be talking about really serious, possibly life-threatening flash flooding along with this storm. Then as the storm comes in, we're going to be looking at strong winds moving inland over several high tide cycles in some areas. Tomorrow morning is going to be a critical tide, especially around Montauk. We could see longshore flow driving water down through the Long Island Sound. And then tomorrow night, the flow is going to be coming out of the south and into southern New England and Long Island. 3 to 5 feet of water level rise is possible over normally dry ground. That is a life-threatening level of storm surge. So you certainly want to be away from the coast as that is coming in. Hurricane warnings now up in Long Island, southern Connecticut, southern Rhode Island. Tropical storm warning for the tri-state area. And here you see the forecast power outages. And, you know, the people that live in New England are not strangers to strong storms like this, but most of these storms happen in the wintertime when the trees have lost all their leaves. Well, right now the trees are fully leaved, and on top of that you've got saturated ground, which makes it easier for the root systems to topple over. And so the result is that we could be looking at widespread tree and power line damage in Long Island, as well as into Connecticut and Rhode Island. Could be many, many days without power for some folks. Interesting model development here. We're seeing more of the ensembles a little farther to the right. We'll talk more about that coming up in just a few minutes. We'll stay with the Weather Channel as we continue to track this very dangerous storm. And keep in mind, you can download the Weather Channel app on Fire TV, Roku, and on your smart TVs. Much more coming up.
And the beaches on Long Island looking a little emptier than you'd expect for the middle of August. This was yesterday, waves kicking up as Henri inches closer to the northeast coast. And people are taking it seriously. In fact, we've had word that some gas stations are out of gas. I know there's been long lines. You know, people are checking their trees to make sure that the limbs aren't going to touch any power lines. In fact, Con Edison crew is busy in the Bronx trimming trees in Pelham Bay. So everyone is getting ready for this system. And in fact, Suffolk County issued a voluntary evacuation for Fire Island, and they're canceling all ferries tomorrow. I have not heard of any shelters that are open, and those are the only evacuation orders I've heard as of now. So let's show you some of the 75 miles of beach along East Hampton, and people are starting to clear out. I mean, we do have some people still left trying to get the last few days, and we have right now just a red flag that is flying for us here, but otherwise people have stayed out of the water. In fact, we talked to one little kid earlier, and he said, I got beat up out there. It was pretty rough. But it's not only the water. High tide tomorrow at just after 9 o'clock. High tide typically, you can see, comes up to here. This is our debris line that we've noticed. But the water could rush all the way up the beach, and then town is right there. And you see these mounds of sand we have right here. They're going to try to block the surge, but the problem is this area is also where all the water drains out. And so they're going to play, do we add the sand? When do we take it away? That's what they're going to follow. Also, look at all of these power poles. They're lining the streets here. This is what we are worried about. Power outages could be huge. And in fact, the power company here in Long Island says it could be 7 to 10 days until they restore power to everybody. So keep that in mind. Also, the trains, probably not running tomorrow. And then depending on if there's debris, power outages on Monday, could be slow traffic. So keep that in mind. It's not only here onto Long Island. We're talking Connecticut, Rhode Island, all the way through Massachusetts, New York, and into southern portions of Vermont, as well as New Hampshire. Watch for those generators too. This is something, you lose power, you put that generator, you want it way away from the house. We don't want to lose anyone because you're inhaling the fumes from that. When is it going to start? As we head, first of all, it's already started. Have you noticed how the clouds have gotten thicker as we've gone through the day here? And the waves have been kicking up more and more. Even though the storm is 395 miles to my south, it's already coming in. The worst of the weather will start tomorrow morning. So if you're thinking you're going to get out early tomorrow morning, you might be fooled. You need to do it. Tonight is the night to do it. Tomorrow is a day to stay home. And it's going to be an all-day event for us here because the storm does slow down. So, Jen, I'm trying to emphasize and remind people, you know, shower tonight, bathe the kids, because if you're 7-8 days without power, get laundry done, maybe cook some food, because that is a long time and it can be very tough.
Put gas in your car. I mean, all the things that you need to do, knowing that you might not have power for, you know, several days, if not more than a week. That's a possibility. All throughout New England. Steph's on Long Island. I'm actually here in Bridgeport, Connecticut, on the Long Island Sound, so just across the ways from her. And, you know, what we're talking about is the potential for some very heavy rainfall that could cause flash flooding, in addition to the power outages. And I want to take you back here just a few days ago when we had the remnants of Tropical Storm Fred come through here. We had big rain, not in Bridgeport, but in Connecticut. We go up to West Hartford, and that's where we had 3 to 6 inches of rain. And we think that this kind of scene, unfortunately, could play itself out here across the state of Connecticut. The rainfall from this storm, different than a lot of them, the rainfall is going to be heaviest on the western side because of the way it's moving, because of the way the moisture is wrapping around, because of the way the storm system actually is going to be slowing down and then actually kind of making a loop-de-loop here and just staying across southern New England for several days. And that's going to be why we have so much rain in the forecast and that potential for flash flooding here Here in Bridgeport, we actually are just about average for rainfall for the year. But you go to a place like Hartford, we're above average for the month. We've doubled our monthly rainfall already, and definitely concerned that the ground is saturated and that when you bring in a couple of inches more of rainfall in a short order of time, not only will you have flooding concerns, but any trees that have shallow roots, those could come out. Those trees could take out power lines, and you see how the dominoes do begin to fall. Quick look here at your forecast, and we know that this is an area saturated in the past 7 days because of what was Fred, because of some heavy thunderstorms that we had in the area. You know, we've had a month of July that was extremely wet across eastern Massachusetts, and then we bring in the heaviest of rainfall from Henri, and you can see the models, while they're slightly different in the exact position, they both have a footprint of some big rain over New England, and we're talking, you know, the chance for 3 to 6 or even more than 6 inches of rain. That is a possibility in some local areas. There's always an overachiever, and that's why the flash flood watches are up. That's why there's an outlook for flash flooding. You know, we've got this trough in place that's helping to pull Henri up here to the north. That itself is going to be a reason to make it rain, and then you bring in all the tropical moisture, and of course that's going to be just a deluge of rain as we get into the coming days. Now back out here to where I am on the Long Island Sound. I'm at Seaside Park in Bridgeport. You can see that I've got the lighthouse behind me. On one side, we've got the Sound. On the other side, we've got the Black Rock Harbor, where there are some boats, and those boats will have to decide what they're going to do here as we watch the approach of Hurricane Henri to the area. Winds are going to be gusty. We're under tropical storm warning. Right now, we are expected to be on the left side of the storm, but we know that track can change. There are wiggles, there are wobbles, so stay tuned to the Weather Channel. We'll have continuing coverage step by step to get you through Hurricane Henri.
And welcome back to our continuing coverage of Hurricane Henri as we continue to watch, preparations for many, many areas. That's for sure. And, it's interesting because I talked to somebody on the beach earlier and they said, Jim, the reason why a lot of people are out here is because they've made the preparations already. They know what to expect. They're certainly planning on losing power. And this, from a recent, statement from the governor, too. He just was on our air. Governor Daniel McKee, expect power outages, expect the storm surge, take the storm seriously. Obviously, expecting Cat 1 hurricane conditions there. Whether we get those or not, prepare for them is what he was asking everybody to do. And even the ferry service out to Block Island back and forth shuts down at about 6:15 tonight. That'll be the last ferry coming in from Block Island. But what about the beaches? They're packed now, but will they be tomorrow? I want to bring in Jack McGreen. He is a lifeguard captain with Scarborough Beach. So he's come over around the pin here a little bit to talk to us about what's happening. You don't have the seawall over there.
No,
so what's the difference in the waves?
So compared to here, the waves are probably triple the size.
Triple?
They have the break wall, so it helps keeping the surf a little low, and they're more in a cove. And we're more open compared to here.
Are your beaches as packed as this one?
I would say about the same, yeah.
About the same?
All state beaches are pretty busy today.
So what is it like? I mean, there's a lot of people in the water here, or there's a lot of people in the water?
So here they have no restrictions, but at Scarborough and I know East Matunic, I'm not sure about Salty Brine. We're all at knee deep right now because today only we've had 5 assists at Scarborough and 5 yesterday, so people are still going out in the water as usual.
And so what are you expecting as we get into tonight? I know this particular beach shuts down at around 6 o'clock. Are you guys shutting down early and then closing tomorrow?
Yeah, all state beaches are closing at 6. Lots are going to be closed at 6 as well. No beaches are going to be open tomorrow. And then we're going to have a late opening on Monday at 12 o'clock. So I would say no one's going to be at the beach on Sunday. So.
No beach on Sunday, and then any time on when you're going to be back.
Yeah, Monday we're going to have
You're talking about maybe Monday.
No, Monday we're going to open late. We usually open at 9 o'clock. Lifeguards are on duty, but we're going to do 12 in the afternoon.
All right, Jack. Keep everybody safe and out of the water.
I'll do my
best. We appreciate you talking to us and giving us a brief on what's happening here at the beaches. So, again, everything's shutting down. Not surprising. You know, just preparing for this thing to roll on through. We talked about the ferries. Also, I just heard the Connecticut Transit Service is also suspending tomorrow. So, with word on Connecticut, let's go into New London. Felicia Combs standing by for a live report for us this afternoon. Felicia, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jim. Yeah, thanks. That's right. It does look as though we are seeing people getting prepared and getting ready for whatever Henri is going to bring to Connecticut and taking the storm very seriously. So with that, we want to make sure you have all the most updated information. I want to bring in the mayor of New Haven, Connecticut, Mayor Justin Elicker. Of course, the past few months, Mayor Elicker, have been rough. Thanks so much for speaking with us. You guys, specifically Connecticut, have been plagued with so many power outages from storms in the past 12 months. So how are the power companies and you guys preparing people for maybe a prolonged period of a couple days without power?
I would warn people that it may be even more than a few days given the winds that we're expecting and the kind of rain that's going to soak the ground and make trees that may historically not be that at risk of falling potential problems. We will be opening our emergency operations center and have a representative from United Illuminating Company that is going to be located within our emergency operations center. You know, they were actually pretty good in Elsa and were quite responsive and quick about addressing our issues. I think the most important thing is to make sure that residents are patient. We've got 3 municipal tree crews that are going to be out just following the storm after it leaves the area, and UI has 4 dedicated, or we also have 4 private companies that are going to help us with tree crews. Of course, UI is going to have their tree crews out as well.
And of course, the power outages aren't the only thing that we're concerned about. Storm surge is a real risk for Connecticut with Henri. So what are some of the most vulnerable parts of your cities, and what are you urging residents to prepare for in terms of dealing with storm surge in those vulnerable parts?
This is one of my main concerns at the moment because it's a full moon tomorrow, so we were already going to have a slightly higher tide. And if you have the combination of the significant storm surges and the amount of rain, New Haven is likely to see some pretty bad problems with flooding. In Tropical Storm Elsa, there was a lot of flooding in the city. We're actually working to recommend evacuation for certain parts of the city, parts of the East Shore neighborhood, a small section of Fairhaven that typically gets flooded, and a small section of the City Point neighborhood. We've opened 4 different sites around the city, schools, as places of refuge for residents if they need to go there, if they can't find friends or family to stay with, or put themselves up in a hotel.
Mayor Elicker, very valuable information there as everyone's preparing for the storm. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule and speaking with us. And of course, we're going to stick with you here on the Weather Channel as well. We've got continuous coverage all the way through Henri, so stay tuned.
Because it's not a beautiful, warm beach day here at Narragansett, which is where we are here in Narragansett Bay. I'm meteorologist Jim Cantori as we continue to cover Hurricane Henri, its approach to the coast tomorrow and beyond with a lot of inland impacts. This is going to extend well beyond the coast, and I hope that we're drilling that into you with our coverage today. We have crews all over the place. All right, we've got them at least joining me these particular hours. Meteorologist Stephanie Abrams, who is in Montauk, Jen Carfagno in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Felicia Combs in New London, Connecticut. And speaking of Connecticut, when the governor comes on to give his press conference, we will join him with that. So just be ready to almost cut from me and go right to that. Let's show you the latest with Henri. First of all, again, it's a minimal hurricane that's pretty much struggling all day. It's running out of time to do what it's got to do, which is good. We don't want it to strengthen, all right? And that would be great news. But the bottom line is we still got one heck of a rainmaker here that's going to come in and slow as it comes into New England and eastern New York State. Hurricane warnings posted from Long Island to coast of Connecticut through Narragansett Bay. And, of course, we bookend that with tropical storm warnings, expecting those winds to get in sometime tomorrow morning over a pretty large swath. And think about it, the rain that we've had, even winds at 39 to 40 miles per hour for a few hours is going to be enough to knock over some trees. So plan on power loss. A lot of people here are planning on power loss, even on the coast. You should over the interior as well. You have a lot more things that can actually knock out the power there. Again, as I mentioned, this arrives tomorrow morning. The probabilities of hurricane force winds coming ashore are less, but whether you get 70 with a tropical storm or 75 with a minimal hurricane is irrelevant. The impacts are going to be the same. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on with this thing. Carl, again, one of the things we pointed out earlier on the satellite is trying to get lightning around the center seems to be a problem for Henri today.
About that, Jim, I mean, you can see it very clearly when you look at the visible imagery. There's clearly some drier air that's wrapping into the circulation. We know there's some ongoing shear there, and so there are a lot of things that are bothering the circulation right now. So let's take a look at some of what the modeling is showing us. Here's the forecast track from the 11 a.m. forecast package from the Hurricane Center. We've got a new forecast package coming out at 5 p.m. We'll see if there are any changes there, but some of the modeling has indicated that it might be shifting a little farther to the right. And what's interesting is that we're actually seeing a little bit of a movement more towards the northeast relative to that last fix. And so that is some of what the latest ensemble guidance from the American model is showing, that maybe it moves a little more towards the northeast as opposed to due north. And then wholesale, the guidance has been shifting a little farther to the east here. So it may be that it's more towards the eastern end of Long Island and southern parts of New England. Still working on that forecast, still trying to fine-tune it. There's still a large spread, especially considering how close we are to landfall. A lot of times you see it really beginning to tighten up by the time you get this close, and this one has been enigmatic for sure. Here's something I really want you to pay attention to. This is one of our high-resolution models. Couple of things. One is that we see this bifurcation here, where a lot of times the right front quadrant is the more dangerous part of the storm, and certainly there's going to be a terrific amount of wind on the right side, but on the left side we may find a lot more weather. And so it could very well be that to the left of the center is where we find the heaviest of rain coming in. That's one thing I want to point out. Another is that this is 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. We're going to go forward here 36 hours. So it's moving in Sunday morning, Sunday night, maybe drifting a little farther west. Monday morning has not moved much at all. Monday night, 36 hours later, it's just starting to come up into central parts of New England. So the duration of this thing is going to be huge. Regardless of what wind and surge impacts we see, we're going to be looking at a terrific amount of rainfall in areas where the ground is saturated, where you've got a lot of pavement in the tri-state area, and also where you've got a lot of terrain. This is the latest output from the European model, a little bit of a shift to the right there. But wherever this happens, it's going to be a huge deal. We could be talking about life-threatening, catastrophic rainfall in some parts of New England and the New York City metro area because the motion is so slow on this thing. Here's the visible satellite imagery. Once again, there you see the center of circulation, some drier air wrapping around the underside of it right there. But that's a really well-defined core. And so if it does manage to get into a more favorable environment, it certainly could get a lot more organized over the next several hours. Here you see the upper low right in there, and there you see the wind driving into the center of circulation. So that is the shear that has been causing this thing to be a little less well organized. Here's what we're talking about as far as tonight. It's got this remaining period of time, about the next 12 hours or so, over this very warm water, and then beyond that, it's going to be over cooler water. So again, if it's not as organized, maybe that means a little bit less in the way of wind and surge. Well, the governor of Connecticut, Ned Lamont, holding a briefing right now on how the state is preparing for Hurricane Henri. Let's take you live and listen in.
Category 1 hurricane that's going to be hitting the state of Connecticut directly and the region more broadly, starting first thing tomorrow morning. It's called Hurricane Henri, Category 1. I don't think the name Henri or Category 1 do justice to the severity of what this storm could represent. Brenda just reminded me that Superstorm Sandy was not even a Category 1 hurricane, and look what that exacted on our state and our region. This is particularly severe because it's going to be 8+ inches of rainfall on top of tons of rainfall that we've had over the last week. And that means our ground is saturated. That means our ground sitting on top of non-porous ledge is like a sponge, and there's no more absorbent, and that leads to flooding. Combine that with the fact that we're going to have an astronomical tide. I mean astronomical in the sense that we have a very full moon, the highest tides you can have. That combined with the wind gives real risk of flooding along the coastline and interior flooding given the saturation of the soil. Saturation of the soil combined with the fact that we could have 70, 80 mile-an-hour winds, that makes the trees a lot less secure. They go over, power goes out, and Eversource and UI have warned us that there could be hundreds of thousands of outages over the next few days and beyond. That said, I'm standing here with some folks here at the Emergency Operations Center, and I want you to know that I don't think Connecticut has ever been as well prepared for a storm as we are for Hurricane Henri. We're working very closely, as you can imagine, with our utilities, in particular, Eversource, United Illuminating, and they're assuring us that they're going to have twice as many people on the ground pre-positioned as we had a year ago. That makes a big difference. And we're going to be able to respond faster and respond in a way that does everything we can to keep you safe. The other thing that we've worked on very closely with the utilities as well as the telecom companies, and if you go back here at the Emergency Operations Center, the big round table with the boards in front, we've had all the commissioners, that's DOT, Transportation, DEEP. We've got General Yvonne representing the Guard. We've got 200 Guard who have been activated, doing everything we can to make sure the lines of communication are clear. I do not want any confusion in terms of what's going on out there. You'll be able to call at any time you want 211, our emergency line, or even better, go to the online 211.org, and you'll be able to get the current information, what's happening. They are plugged into each of our regional operations centers, so they'll be able to tell you by region exactly what is being remedied and how fast it can be remedied. Along the way, we just met with all the mayors and others remotely, of course, and made sure that they activate their emergency operations center town by town. Each of those operations centers is going to have a representative of the utilities assigned to that, so they get immediate response in terms of trees down. I can't promise you the trees are going to be back up and your power is back up within 48 hours, but I can tell you we're going to be able to do the best we can to get you a response in order to keep you safe. Look, I think we found out from ICEA the hard way that electricity is not a nice to have. Electricity is an absolutely essential service. We know what it means in terms of medicine. We know what it means in terms of food. We know what it means in terms of the fact that next week we could have 90-degree weather. We're tracking very closely those most at risk, including, for example, our nursing homes, making sure that if they're right in the eye of the storm, if they have to evacuate, we know where they can be evacuated to. Making sure that we have the standby power so we can keep the cooling centers available and we can keep people safe. I just urge you on a personal note, as I've said before, two things. Stay safe, stay home. Get yourself a little extra gasoline. Make sure you have your phones all charged. Make sure you have 3, 4, 5 days worth of food stored. Make sure you have the phone number of some people that maybe are living alone and need a little extra assurance, so you can reach out to them and care for them and make sure they're taken care of. But I can tell you here on behalf of Susan and myself and all the folks at the Emergency Operations Center, we're prepared for what could be a tough storm. And we're going to hold the utilities accountable. But right now, we got the folks on the ground ready to hit the ground running and do everything we can to keep you safe. With that, any of us here are happy to take any questions.
And the governor of Connecticut just finishing up his briefing now, beginning to take questions for, folks that obviously are concerned about what Henri is going to bring in to the state of Connecticut. Very similar to what we heard certainly from the governor of Rhode Island in, talking about how they want everybody to be prepared and prepare for delays. Things are going to be closing down, all those kind of things. So, tomorrow's just going to be kind of a rough day. And then we're not out of the woods. And it's not, and he also mentioned, which I thought was great, the fact that this is not just a coastal situation. Sure, we've got the astronomical high tides. We know we're going to get a water rise with the storm coming ashore, but we also have the inland flooding event. and he was very aware of how wet it has been this summer across interior New England. So that's exactly what you heard in this area. So let's go ahead and show you what we got going around here in Narragansett, which is where I am on the other side of the bay, the west side of the bay. Waves have been really picking up during our live shots. It's kind of amazing. Not only have we seen that, but we've also heard that. So they're a lot noisier than they were. You can see where the waves have run up at high tide, and they've brought some of the debris with them. We do expect this to get a lot higher, all right? So, you know, sure, we're watching the tides. Low tide is going to be around 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Then high tide is going to be around 8:30. And what we could see is a 3 to 5 foot storm surge maximized. So we're talking about 3 to 5 feet above the ground that I'm standing on right now. That's a worst case scenario, certainly, that they present to you because they want you to get ready for that. So in a worst case scenario, you're talking about water that is probably going to run up the beach and probably inundate the beach in through here. And then you got waves on top of that. Now, granted, they're not as big as they are in other beaches that don't have seawalls out there to protect them from the waves, but they'll be high. And they'll be certainly in a situation where they will come in and do some damage potentially to the beach. So that's one of the concerns here. The wind will move in. We'll have potential power outages. A lot of people talking about getting gas over the last 24 hours, having that gas ready for your generators. Please do not operate the generator inside a closed garage.
Sorry.
In all honesty, we've lost more people in storms, weaker storms, because of people operating their generators inside the garage with carbon monoxide poisoning than we've lost from the storms themselves. So please don't do that. All right, let's go down to Montauk Point. We'll talk about another area that is going to deal with storm surge and wind, and obviously changes. Steph, you talked about how they're going to change the train situation there, like we're going to change the ferries in through here. 6:15 tonight, we're done.
And that's the thing, too. Fire Island, voluntary evacuations and, you know, a lot of transportation will not be running here. And, Jim, we've actually moved just in town a smidge to give you a little bit of a different perspective. We've been on the beach all morning long, and that's where we were. You see that mound of sand we were talking about all morning long? That's meant to block off the beach from the surge coming in. The problem is the water is supposed to drain down the street out into the beach. So they're going to have to play a little bit of a cat and mouse game of letting enough water drain out while stopping the surge from coming on in. The Connecticut governor, he was mentioning about how the ground is so saturated. On Long Island, believe it or not, we're about average for rainfall, but in Connecticut, in Hartford, 4.8 inches above average for the year. Boston and Worcester, both 6 inches above average for the year. So it is definitely wet out there. When will the worst come? That's what everyone keeps asking us here around 10. When is it coming? When is it coming? Tomorrow all day is going to be a bad day. It's going to start bad in the morning, it's going to get worse into the afternoon, and then the storm's going to continue through. So really the whole day is a bit of a wash. And Jim was mentioning the tides, and so was the governor as well. Our high tide here tomorrow morning at 9:18 is kind of worst case scenario because that's when the storm's going to be pushing ashore. So you're going to get that push, and we expect to see that water coming into the streets. A lot of people leaving the beach now, and they will not be at the beaches tomorrow. New York City beaches, by the way, closed for the next couple of days. But that surge could be 3 to 5 feet. So keep that in mind. A lot of low-lying areas, maybe get your car a little bit higher if you're concerned. And those waves have been kicking up to 17 feet already today. And remember, a one-story building is about 10 feet. This could go up 2 stories, essentially. So we're talking about wave heights, by the way, not the surge coming up here 2 feet. The wave heights, though, could be up to 17 feet and higher than that. So let's go to Felicia now because, yes, we talk about the coast, but Felicia, this is going to go in and it kind of slows down a little bit. And we can have very heavy rain on the west side of the system going all the way deep into New England.
Yeah, Steph, a slow-moving system. That's what we see. Those rainfall totals really adding up. So water is going to be the problem with Henri, whether we're talking about rainfall or storm surge like here in New London. We're here on the Thames River in New London. That takes us out to the Long Island Sound and storm surge. That's one of the risks here for this city of southern Connecticut. You can keep listening to our coverage on Sirius XM on the app.
When it comes to covering the most important issue facing us and our Earth, one day does make all the difference. Now, the Weather Channel and its innovative climate team at Pattern are connecting you every day to the most fascinating stories impacting our planet. For what's now and what's next, rely on the climate experts with the most trusted name in TV news. If it's out there, it's in here. The Weather Channel.
I'm meteorologist Jen Carfagno in Bridgeport, Connecticut, as we await the arrival of Hurricane Henri tomorrow. Today, it's all about preparing. And actually, we just heard from the governor in his press conference, Governor Ned Lamont of Connecticut, urging people with a personal plea to be prepared for this one. Power outages, widespread, long-lasting power outages, are going to be one of the biggest problems because of Henri as it comes in. But so will heavy rainfall. And the concern for flash flooding is up because we have inches of rain coming in, especially to areas that were just hard hit a few days ago with inches of rain, like across the middle and northern part of the state of Connecticut. The entire tri-state area is going to be impacted by Henri, and we are expecting impacts starting early tomorrow morning. In fact, maybe even tonight, because for some of you, travel is going to be impacted sooner than later. Connecticut Transit, the bus service, has been suspended for Sunday. Already overnight trains will be affected as well. And we do have a state of emergency in Matt, could you say that one more time to me? Oh, in New York City now, a state of emergency has been declared, along with here in Connecticut, and that frees up resources to respond as they need to after Henri moves in, and we are anticipating the power outages, we're anticipating the flooding, we're anticipating the surge as well. And I want to bring that up here in Bridgeport. I'm at Seaside Park. You can see behind me a beautiful view, actually, of the water. The beach is cleared out completely because we just had a little rain shower that came on in and people decided to exit. Now, we're at low tide right now, which this is about the time that we are expecting Henri to come in. And so that is going to mean, yes, an approach at low tide is much better than at high tide. However, even with being at low tide, we think that water could come all the way up. And of course, in those areas that streams and rivers that are susceptible to the tidal flooding, you too will be dealing with some of that as we get into the overnight. We get to that high tide. So very concerned about flooding. Rainfall flooding, certainly with inches of rain coming our way, and the power going out. And it's all about being safe and being prepared. Let's go back into Carl Parker, more in the studio for that, Carl.
All right, Jen, thank you so much. And now more than ever, people are concerned about the impacts from the storm and possible extended power outages. Now, a portable generator may keep a refrigerator and a few small appliances running, but there are safety issues if they're not operated properly. But there is a better way to power your home after a power outage, and Jim Cantori met with Kohler Home Improvement expert Ed Del Grande to see the future of home generators.
We had a record number of billion-dollar weather disasters last year, and having an emergency preparedness kit for a few days sometimes just doesn't cut it. Let's talk about adding a generator to your arsenal. Ed, there are generators and there are generators.
Yes, there are.
What's the benefit of having a generator?
Well, the big benefit, let's face it, we now live in a plugged-in society. Just about everything we use requires electricity. So your best defense is having a backup generator system.
So what are the differences?
Well, the big difference is there's a portable and a standby. The portable generators are great for things like camping and tailgating, and in a pinch, they'll run a few appliances in your house. Now, remember, with a portable one, you do have to refuel them. They run on gasoline. Right. And you also have to make sure you run it outside, away from the house. So you do have to do some constant care on it throughout the event. With a standby generator, you don't have any of those concerns. These things are permanently installed to the home's electrical system. They come on automatically, and they could power up the entire house, not just a few circuits.
And being able to stay in your home and make repairs to your home, isn't that almost like having the comforts of home, even though you have to put up with that?
Absolutely. And a standby generator is like your own personal power plant in your backyard. Now, natural gas is great. It'll hook right up to your gas lines. If you don't have natural gas, you could use propane gas. And if you use propane,
You've got power now to power your house.
Absolutely.
That's a win, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
All right, Jim, thank you. And we are watching now a 75-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane. Got a new forecast advisory coming up from the Hurricane Center in about a half an hour or so. I want to show you the visible satellite imagery. This thing has been struggling today with shear and also with some drier air wrapping in, but it's sort of an organized, unorganized system. We're actually now starting to see a little bit of an eye developing right in there. And so there's a very well-developed core, even though there haven't been a lot of tall thunderstorms about that. And it's got some time yet. It's got about 8 hours sitting over very warm water over the Gulf Stream here. And then beyond that, it's going to move into cooler water. So the next 8 hours or so are going to be very telling in terms of what exactly is going to happen with this storm. And we are expecting that there could be widespread power outages in southern New England. Much more on that coming up in a few minutes.
Here's my new dress. What's that? Oh, Damp Rid.
Damp Rid? Damp Rid. It gets rid of musty odors.
How? Damp Rid attracts and traps excess moisture,
eliminating the source of musty odors.
Mustiness, gone.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel. Tennessee right now experiencing catastrophic flooding. I-40 shut down in both directions due to high water around mile marker 153. Yeah, nearly 10 inches or more of rain has fallen across western Middle Tennessee today. Piney River gauge at 31.8 feet, so that is well over the historic crest they saw there of 20.8 feet. That record set just 2 years ago in 2019. And new video in right now to the Weather Channel shows just how significant the flooding is out there. In fact, we have rescue workers here helping a family get out of waist-high waters in what was the street right in front of their home. So really just a devastating situation there in Tennessee, and it is not over yet. So the heaviest of the rain has now moved out of the flooded area. However, we do have more rain coming in later on tonight and into the overnight hours. So this is a look at through tomorrow morning, what we're expecting, at least some rain falling on top of this already completely saturated ground there in Tennessee. Looking at future radar, watching another perhaps even sizable band of rain coming through in the early morning hours on Sunday, which will again just lead to more problems there in Tennessee, where there have been numerous high water rescues throughout the day today. Again, travel is not advised along I-40. We're talking about west of Nashville. Dickinson, Hickman, and Humphreys counties, you're under a flash flood emergency until 5 o'clock. Well, our continuing coverage of Henri now takes us to Jim Cantori. He is live in Narragansett, Rhode Island. Jim, over to you.
Some of these pictures coming out of Waverly, Tennessee are just unbelievable. You know, seeing people on their roofs, people being rescued. The city's completely shut off due to any kind of vehicles there because there's just so much water. We'll continue to update you on that, as we will Henri. Expecting a new advisory here within the half hour from the National Hurricane Center. This will be a complete advisory, and what I mean by that is you'll get a new cone. You'll get, you know, certainly they're thinking on what the intensity is going through, or what, you know, when the hurricane hunters are going to be out there, what they've seen, and all those sort of things. But certainly we will see impacts, not only what's expected along the coast, but what's expected inland, and the kind of water that this thing is bringing up into interior Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, northern New Jersey, even northern Rhode Island. In some cases, may be very, very harsh to deal with because of the kind of summer that we've had so far. So flash flooding and certainly power outages with flooding are going to be a huge concern. This may become more of an inland issue than what we see on the coast. It wouldn't surprise me at all. So hurricane warnings, we've got them bookended by the tropical storm warnings between New York City and Cape Cod. All right, so here we are in Narragansett Bay. We're under the hurricane warning. We are also under a storm surge warning. We're expecting 3 to 5 feet here. And we mentioned earlier the ferries that leave this area from Narragansett out to Block Island. The last one that will be coming in tonight will be at 6:15, and then that's it with the services. The beach is shut down tomorrow. Kind of your typical, hey, the storm is coming in, we're just slowly shutting things down. When are the tropical storm force winds going to get here? It's a good question, because at that point, if you want to put up plywood on your windows or whatever, have you ever tried to hold a piece of plywood when the winds are blowing at 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. It doesn't happen. Can't do it. It's like holding a parachute. Hurricane force winds, not as high a probability here. We may not ever see a hurricane force gust, but the difference is very little between 75 and also into 70 miles an hour with a high-end tropical storm. All right, Carl Parker, let's pick your brain a little bit. What are you expecting to see from the Hurricane Center at 5 o'clock? Any kind of a shift in track or thinking at this point?
You know what? I'm going to cheat, Jim, because I've got the answer. We just got in the new cone, and they did.
Okay.
They did move it over a little bit, just slightly to the east, and we'll show you that in just a second. Want to show you some new video from Watch Hill in Rhode Island. People getting ready, boarding up, some evacuating. This was sent from Casey O'Brien, and so people certainly taking the storm very seriously. And again, we've got the brand new advisory from the National Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m. Still a Category 1, 75-mile-per-hour storm, picking up a slight amount of speed, moving northeast now at 18 miles per hour. And let's get a look at the latest forecast track and intensities from the Hurricane Center. And so there again is the latest data on the storm. Here is the new forecast track. And so just a very, very slight shift to the right. We've been seeing a little of the, more of the guidance moving a little farther east. And so basically it's, implicating Long Island and the southern part of the New England coast, and a little bit of narrowing too, which is what you would expect as the forecast errors decrease as you get closer in time. But we're expecting, pretty much the same thing, a strong tropical storm or possibly a hurricane coming into Long Island early tomorrow morning, and then slowly moving up through southern New England over the next 36 hours after that. We'll have much more coming up.
Facing leaks.
And the new advisory from the National Hurricane Center on Hurricane Henri is out, the 5 o'clock advisory. It is still a Category 1 hurricane, winds of 75 miles per hour. And the latest update, actually, from the National Hurricane Center discusses the fact that based on visible satellite and based on some types of satellite data, you can really see a tight inner core with Hurricane Henri. And that would mean that it certainly is not weakening right now. So we are watching it moving over some very warm water. It's continuing that northeast movement, and it's a little over 300 miles away from Montauk in New York. So right here where I am in Bridgeport, Connecticut, on one side of me, I'm at Seaside Park, on one side of me, I've got the Long Island Sound, and you can see the water out there. We are at low tide right now. You can see how far away actually that water is. So this is about the timing of when we expect the approach of Henri here to the coast in Connecticut. But still, even with that, we think the water could come all the way up here. We'll have to see how much gets washed over the roads that are in the park. Beyond me, I've got the lighthouse out in the distance, and then I've got the Black Rock Harbor over here. So calm right now, but even that could get a bit choppy as we see winds, tropical storm force is what we're expecting here tomorrow afternoon. Conditions will go downhill very rapidly through the day tomorrow, and you need to be rushing your preparations today to completion, and that's really what it's all about. Earlier, we just heard from Governor Ned Lamont of Connecticut, really making a personal plea for people to prepare today. They're doing what they can on their end. He's issued a state of emergency for Connecticut so that all of the crews can get in place before the storm gets here, and really learning from past events like Isaias last year, that preparation is always 100-fold the way to be ready for a storm like this and make that recovery so much faster. Getting those crews here, pre-positioned to go. Eversource is ready for power outages. That said, you can't control Mother Nature, right? So when trees come down on power lines, that they have to be removed, the power has to be restored, and that will take time. So while they do have, I understand, double the crews that they had last year this time, when it came to Isaias, it's still going to take anywhere from 5 days to even 10 days to get power restored after the type of power outages and the extent of power outages that we are expecting with this. Now, flooding is going to be a problem. I want to take you back just a few days ago to West Hartford when we had flooding because of what was left from Fred when it came through here. Inches of rain, about 3 to 6 inches. A quarter of that fell from northern Connecticut, including in West Hartford, all the way up into Massachusetts. And there was a lot of scenes just like this that played out. And that's what I'm worried about happening here with Henri, is that we will have the heavy rainfall and the flash flooding that will create scenes like this even more widespread. You just have to go back to the beginning of the summer, late in June, when we had just thunderstorms in the Bridgeport area that created some scenes like that, unfortunately. So if we get 3 to 6 inches of rainfall in a short order of time, and with a slowing system, a tropical system over us, that could easily happen. So be ready for flooded roadways, and of course be ready for the power outages. All right, let's go down here actually to Long Island and check in with Steph again. And Steph, the new advisory is out, and using your location there, about 300 and some miles away from you as it continues on that north-northeast trek.
And Jen, we're already feeling the effects. It's been getting cloudier and cloudier and cloudier every day. Guard here, they're taking the jet skis now. It's a rough day here at the beach, so they're now taking the jet skis off the beach. In fact, they also took the lifeguard stand off the beach already to prepare for the storm. And I got to tell you, it is starting to clear out. So people are starting to go home and deciding if they're staying or going, because this is the time to do it. I also want to mention high tide is at 8:56, and look at the water's already starting to come up. The low tide was at 3:03, and the water's already, you'll see the waves start to run up, and high tide isn't until tonight at 8:56. So we expect this whole beach to be covered as Henri continues to get closer. It's not only this beach though. All the beaches here are going to start clearing out. We have lifeguards in Long Island Beach in New York as well. They were clearing out all of the chairs and getting everything, secured down so things didn't go flying and get destroyed when the storm comes ashore, because it's not only the waves and the surge and the rain, it's the wind as well. Power outages could be significant, not only in Long Island, but Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and inland as well as the storm moves inland. We want to remind you that if you do have a generator, you want to make sure you keep it well away from the house so you don't die from any fumes. Too many people die too often with those fumes because they are too close to the house. Stay away from down power lines as well. And you don't want to use candles. That's really a key one. No candles. And tape on the windows doesn't do anything either, by the way. So just a reminder for the rest of hurricane season. Things will continue to go downhill as we head tonight, and then tomorrow morning is when we really start to feel the effects of this, and then it gets worse as the day progresses into the afternoon, and then the storm continues as we head into the evening inland. So I think the worst times for us here along coastal New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, into the morning hours, into the afternoon, and then the storm is going to continue its trek inland. So you want to make sure that you stay with us here on the Weather Channel. We have live team coverage, meteorologists spread throughout the field, keeping you ahead of the storm, and we'll walk you through step by step, because a lot of people in the Northeast aren't used to hurricanes, right? And remember that a lot of people are on vacation. The population swells 2-3 times here on Long Island, especially, in the Hamptons, as people are here for the last hurrah as summer is coming to an end and we are heading back to school. More live updates next.
It took a while to get up here. We started out around 1959. A few million miles later, and voila. But we didn't do all that just to get here. We did it to give you a truck that'll take you anywhere. This is the new Nissan.
Visible is wireless that gets better with friends. Pay as low as $25 a month, or bring a friend, and you both get a month for $5. So the more people you roll with, the more you save.
Welcome back to our coverage of Hurricane Henri. We have the new advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Still a Category 1 storm, 75-mile-per-hour winds, now moving north-northeast at 18 miles per hour. Just some slight changes in the forecast, a little bit of a shift to the east. It is still expected to be a Category 1 storm as it is approaching early tomorrow morning, and then it is going to slow down dramatically beyond that, and that is going to amplify all of the effects, surge over several high tide cycles, also a prolonged period of strong winds and very heavy rain. You see the GFS model indicating a little bit of a shift here, and so the National Hurricane Center responding to that. Also want to show you that the hurricane hunters have been making their way out to the core of the storm, and they actually turn tail. Might be a mechanical issue, so we'll have to wait for the NOAA hurricane hunters to get in there. But as we look at the visible satellite picture, we're seeing a pretty impressive little core right there, and even a little bit of an eye developing. And so certainly the core, Jim, has been more organized, even as a lot of the deep convection has really not been present around the center of circulation. And, you know, this next several hours, that's going to be the critical period. It's going to be passing over very warm water over the Gulf Stream, and if the upper level environment becomes a little more favorable, it's got a real shot here to get much more organized.
So that's interesting, because I was reading into the discussion as well, and as you were, and they seem very bullish on this organization here during the overnight hours due to light shear, divergence, atmospherics, if you will, but yet only bringing it up to 80 miles an hour. So it's kind of like it could, but we're not going to really go there yet. The other thing, too, I was, you know, in their key messages at the end, Carl, I was thinking I wanted to see the inland flood threat beefed up a little bit. You know, and I was kind of surprised I didn't see that. I thought, you know, given what we know in terms of speed, slowing down, the amount of water, the pre-existing conditions, that would be kind of a little bit more of a beefy line there. But either way, it's a great discussion, as always is from those guys, and they do lay out the key points for you, which means everyone from the coast through the interior certainly needs to pay attention to this thing as it comes in. You mentioned the shift to the right and through here. And what we're expecting here in Narragansett is the waves to continue to increase in size. All right, we've really seen that since we've been out of here with you, since 1 o'clock this afternoon. We've seen them kind of roll in. It's been a great beach day for a lot of folks. Just now really are the thicker high clouds beginning to roll on in. You can see where the waves brought the debris line up at the last high tide. That next high tide coming in past 8 o'clock tonight may go a little bit farther. Tomorrow we're at low tide at 2, and then 8:30 at night we are at high tide once again. So we'll see what's left of that onshore flow when this thing finally comes ashore to see how high that water gets. Our maximum surge forecast, 3 to 5 feet. So that's 3 to 5 feet above where I'm standing, and whatever waves, of course, roll in on top of that. So that's what we're looking at here at Narragansett. We are hunkered down. I think a big push today has been for people to get gas. A lot of people have generators here. They're used to losing power, and the ferry service shuts down tonight at 6:15 out toward Block Island. All right, I'm sorry, Kelly, where am I going? I'm sorry? Felicia. Okay, let's go out to New London, Connecticut. Felicia Combs. Felicia, I should have known that. I've been tossing to you the entire afternoon. Why didn't I remember that? Anyway,
you know,
over to you.
You've had a lot going on, Jim. I won't take it personally. As everyone gets ready for the hurricane here in New London, we're getting ready as well. So let's talk about it, because you know where we are particularly. I want to show you. I want to give you an idea of exactly where New London sits. So we're on the Thames River, and I want you to look out here just so you can get a grasp of how much water really is around us. So you see the boats. That's actually a mooring field. Those are the boats that have dropped anchor, and they're going to ride out the storm. They should be great, with the exception of the rope breaking. So let's hope that doesn't happen for anyone. Beyond that is the Long Island Sound, and beyond that, of course, is the Atlantic. So where we are here in New London, Connecticut, the storm surge forecast is for 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. So we do have a storm surge warning in effect here. Now, what I'm standing on, this is actually a pretty cool kind of structure that we have going on. This piling here is actually dug down deep into well beyond the water, but this is a moving dock. So this is what we call a floating dock here. So it's able to go up and down with the rising of the water, with the rising of the storm surge or the falling. Now, if you look a little bit farther to my right, this is a stationary dock. This is what you have the boats kind of getting hooked up to. This has been here for much longer. Our floating dock has only been here for a few years. The stationary dock, obviously, much longer. But you'll notice that that's where we see most of the boats hooked up to, and 3 to 5 feet storm surge could definitely overtop that stationary dock. So it's something that they're worried about here at this particular marina. Of course, with this latest forecast, we've got to keep a very close eye on Henri and what it's going to mean for that storm surge. Of course, make sure you stay with the Weather Channel. We've got a bunch of different ways you can stay up with us. We're tracking Henri throughout the weekend. You can stream live coverage on channel 271 in the Sirius XM app or web player through Monday evening. And of course, download the app on your Roku TV and stay up with the Weather Channel in that way.
With the Capital One Venture Card, you earn unlimited double miles.
Time is running out to prepare as Hurricane Henri closes in on the Northeast. Landfall comes tomorrow as strong winds, dangerous storm surge, and flooding will all be significant threats for the coast. All this coming just days after Fred's remnants left widespread flooding across the Northeast. We have live team coverage with Tevin Wooten in Long Island in New York, Justin Michaels in Boston, Massachusetts. But first, let's get right to our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knapp, for the newest advisory. Dr. Knapp, any strengthening here, and what have the hurricane hunters found?
Well, the maximum sustained winds have stayed at 75 miles an hour, but it appears poised to strengthen. And we had an Air Force plane that was going to go in there. They weren't able to, had to turn back, but a NOAA plane is on the way. So in the next hour or two, we should have aircraft data to see if it is strengthening. And I'll show you what's going on the satellite, because if you look at the infrared imagery, it doesn't look all that impressive. But we'll zoom in and I'll show you why there is an inner core that looks like it might be poised to tighten up. So max winds at 75 and the pressure's 991 and northeast at 18 miles an hour. So it's moving quickly for now, which is going to shorten the window for the conditions to get to the coast tomorrow morning, but then it's going to slow down and hang around for a while. So that's a bad combination. We'd like more time to prepare and less time for the storm to hang out over us, right? Now, here's the NOAA Hurricane Hunter plane. Took off from Lakeland a little while ago, and they're headed off the coast of the Carolinas. Should be into the storm in the next hour and a half or so. And we'll get data from inside there because we haven't had aircraft data in there for a little while. So the satellite estimates are still right at 75 miles an hour. Now, this forecast is valid 2 a.m. Sunday, and that is stronger because it has several more hours over warm water before it crosses over the north wall of the Gulf Stream. So it could get stronger, maybe even a little stronger than what you see here. But bottom line is it'll have an up and then a down because it'll weaken over cooler waters, and the forecast is for it to be very near that hurricane tropical storm threshold. Either way, not much difference between a 70-mile-an-hour storm and a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane, and there's still the very slow motion. It takes a couple of days to get out of New England. So once it starts, it'll last for a while. No changes to the tropical storm and hurricane warnings, and no change to the expected timing of the arrival of winds of tropical storm force. So the center of circulation might be crossing the coast around, Sunday afternoon, but the winds will get there sooner. Don't wait for landfall to have your plan to get ready. You got to go to bed tonight in your safe spot, because when you wake up tomorrow morning, the rain will start and the strong winds will start. No change to the storm surge warnings. Goes all the way from over LaGuardia Airport all the way out to the southern shores of Cape Cod, and the values are still the same, 3 to 5 feet above normally dry ground out to the east there. Here's that trough that is pulling Henri northward. That's why it's accelerating right now, but it's going to get caught in that trough, and a big ridge is going to stop its forward motion after it makes landfall. So if you look at the visible imagery, it looks a little healthier than it did on the infrared, doesn't it? Let's zoom in on that in a second. There's the north wall of the Gulf Stream. The storm is down here. So it's got a while yet over those warm waters. So the next several hours will be key to see how strong it gets. The stronger it is here, the stronger it could be after it does a little bit of weakening. And zooming in on the visible imagery, there's a bit of an eye that has occasionally been showing up because we've got a bit of eye wall convection in here, and the center circulation is up in there, but it does have some dry air. So it's been struggling a bit, but it does look like it has a chance to strengthen. There's that time over the warm waters and the opportunity to strengthen. But Mike, once it gets here, it's going to be a category slow.
Dr. Knapp, I want to ask you specifically about, the possibility of a landfall location. Looks more and more likely far eastern Long Island at this point. So now I feel like the concern really ramps up for places like coastal Connecticut, certainly Long Island, but coastal Connecticut, and now Rhode Island as well, coastal Massachusetts, for pretty strong storm surge here.
Yes, and it's important to emphasize that storm surge in a landfall location on eastern Long Island, for example, that storm surge can extend both to the east and to the west of the center, because as it's moving in from the south, on the north side, the winds will push the storm surge into Long Island Sound. And on the right-hand side, you'll have that push into the southeastern part of Massachusetts with a lot of wave action there, too. So, Mike, I don't want anybody to think that one side of the track or the other eliminates any of the hazards.
Of course not. Dr. Nab, thank you so much for the update there. We're going to have more throughout the show tonight with Dr. Nab. The Weather Channel's Tevin Wooten joins us live now. He's in Montauk, far eastern end of Long Island. Looks like potentially here, Tevin, if you just take the center cone, right, you'd be in the direct path of the center of the cone there.
Yeah.
What would that mean for a place like eastern Long Island?
Mike, of course, that's going to mean damaging winds. That will also mean storm surge here on the easternmost point of Long Island. We're live for you in Montauk right now. There's the Atlantic Ocean. The storm is about 330 or so miles to our south and southeast, but it does start to turn and charge towards the north in the next 10 to 12, 18 hours. So tomorrow morning, this beach will look a lot different, but look at how huge these waves are right now. These waves are not normally this high. The water is not normally this churned up, but because of the force of the wind, still hundreds of miles away, that has perturbed this ocean for the past 12 hours, we are starting to see large swells, and this is perhaps the largest of the wave action I have seen thus far. We were live earlier this morning around 9 a.m., and you had one or two nodes ever so often coming through. It sounds like a wall of water crashing down, because it is quite literally a wall of water crashing down. You could hear this sound, the boom of the water, from about 2 blocks away from the water. And just to show you, when we talk about this storm surge threat, we are under a storm surge warning. We're potentially anticipating some 3 to 5 feet of water above normally dry ground. That's certainly going to engulf this beach right here. In fact, earlier this morning, when we had high tide around 8 o'clock in the morning, a lot of this beach was almost non-existent because water was coming up so high and so quickly. Now you couple the strong push of the wind for 10, for 12, for 24, for 36 hours. That is really going to bring in the water of the Atlantic, covering portions of this beach. Now, depending on where you are in Montauk and all the way to Sag Harbor, that push of water looks a little bit different. I'm about 40 yards away from the camera right now. We have plenty of dunes protecting some of the condos here. But if I were to go, say, 200 yards to my left, the water is basically 6 feet. The water's edge is basically 6 feet from a lot of the dunes that protect some of the homes. So here, we're about 40 yards away. Not that far away, we actually see that water become, or that coastline or that beach become shortened significantly. So for a lot of the homeowners here, the business owners, they are taking this storm extremely seriously. I know that there are some restaurants and bars that are still open for the last minute, folks. I'm sure last call will start to be right around midnight, and that will be the last call because Sunday everything will be shut down here, Mike, in Montauk. We're going to continue monitoring the situation right now. I can already tell the clouds are starting to stream in. Again, Mike, earlier today, you're talking about a heat index of about 80 to 85 degrees, blue skies, hundreds of people on this beach. But folks have started to get the word, and they are getting out of here quickly. Mike?
Indeed. Tevin, thank you so much for the update there. That does not look like a very happy Atlantic Ocean behind him, that's for sure. We know as Henri approaches, people in New England must be thinking about scenes that they've seen in previous storms, like a year ago. This is when Isaias ripped through the Northeast, tore down thousands of trees in the process. First, the storm, though, saturated the ground. It was pounding rain. Then it delivered that second blow, knocking down vulnerable trees with those strong winds. Extensive power outages are anticipated with Henri. So let's bring back our...
We believe Henri has the potential for significant and lengthy outages. We have about 1.25 million electric customers in Connecticut. Unfortunately, we're estimating that between 30 and 49% of them could lose power, and restoration could take anywhere from 5 to 10 days for some customers. So yes, we have mobilized all available resources. We've reached out across the country for additional utility crews. As I said, this is unprecedented. 4,000 plus utility crews in Connecticut. We've never had as large a contingent as we will have for this storm.
All right, so now let's bring back in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb. Dr. Knabb, listen to what he had to say here. The percentage of customers that may lose power and for how long they may be without power, estimating some may go without power for 10 days.
Yeah, and so that is why power outages can be surprisingly dangerous, even deadly in some circumstances, if you're not careful and don't plan ahead. And we're going to take you through some things to keep in mind and realize that this could produce stronger winds in some places than did Isaias in the Northeast. And we've got saturated soils again, so downed trees are a strong likelihood, as are the power outages, regardless of whether or not it comes in as a top-end tropical storm or a Category 1 hurricane. Not much difference between 70 and 75 miles an hour, and you see how long it's going to last. So the longer duration of the wind with a slow mover over the next couple of days increases the chances that trees come down. And those winds will be starting tomorrow morning. It's not going to be when landfall occurs in the afternoon that the winds start. It's not a point on the map. The winds will start in the morning, so you want to be in your safe place starting tonight. Here are the areas under tropical storm and hurricane warnings, but strong winds will extend inland from there. And the chances are greater than 50-50 of sustained tropical storm force winds going well inland into interior New England. And some areas have a non-zero chance of at least getting gusts of tropical storm force way inland. This is not just going to be a coastal event. Same with the power outages, not just going to be a coastal event. Even New York City, Boston, out on the Cape and the islands, possible power outages, but widespread power outages closer to the core of the storm. And again, some of these power outages, when they start, they could last quite a while. So what do you need to do to be safe from a power outage? Generators are the #1 way that people die in association with power outages, by running generators indoors. Keep them outside, far away from the building. Don't use candles or other open flame. Too much risk of fire. Stay away from any down power lines. And here's a big one. If you know anybody, especially our elderly friends and family members that have life-sustaining medical equipment that requires power, get them to a place where they can be near medical care and someplace with backup power, so that this long-duration power outage doesn't put them in a life-threatening situation, Mike.
Could be so difficult for so many people. Dr. Knapp, really appreciate that. We want to go to Boston right now. The Weather Channel's Justin Michaels joins us live this evening. Justin, I feel like there are almost two concerns different concerns for different parts of the state, right? Like eastern Massachusetts, wind, storm surge, western Massachusetts, wind, and maybe flooding rain. It's a tale of two states almost.
It really is, and this is going to be a multi-day event here. You have to remember, Mike, and you well know this, when this thing goes up and it's going to continue to move north and then eventually make its turn back to the east, the effects are really going to change and maybe even be worse here in Boston Monday into Tuesday. So even though it's going to make landfall, you know, not all that far from right now, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods here in Boston. And a lot of people here seem to think, oh, it's not anywhere near us. It's not going to impact us. It really just shows you that just because a storm goes on land doesn't mean the story's over. And Dr. Knapp was talking about that related to the power outages. We definitely could see power outages here, especially because of the tree canopy and how saturated this entire area is. So what kind of timing are we talking about? Well, the initial impacts from Henri are going to begin here probably about 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. The next high tide here is around 11 o'clock tonight. But tomorrow, Sunday, noon time high tide, that could be a little bit of an issue. Follow me over this way, because even here in Boston, even though we're not where landfall is going to happen, even though we're not seemingly anywhere near where the big impacts, and I only put that in air quotes, big impacts are going to be, we do have a storm surge potential here of 1 to 2 feet, which is really not going to be an issue here along the seawall in downtown Boston. Certainly not even going to be like what it has been during king tides that they've experienced here. In fact, during a king tide, all where I'm standing now would be underwater. The tide tomorrow and the storm surge probably isn't going to be doing anything like that, and this is why. Come follow me over here, Mike. Mike, take a look at the seawall here in Boston. You can see just how large that seawall is. It's not going to be an issue here, but if you're coastal, if you don't have a seawall, if you're in an area where you have less than 1 to 2 feet rise out of the water, yes, it certainly could be an issue. Then you get down to Buzzards Bay, Mike, you get down into the south coast of Massachusetts, we're talking 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. So we've got issues, and it's going to last for several more days, even here in Boston. Mike, into
All right, Justin, I really appreciate the update there from Boston. Just hold on tight, that's for sure. More from Justin coming up here in just a little bit. Want to keep you up to date on what's going to be happening with Henri and the amount of rain that we'll see and the flooding that could come our way. Flash flooding is going to be likely here. All of New Jersey, by the way, is under a flood watch right now, and the flooding could go all the way up to the Capital District and beyond in Albany. Springfield, all of Connecticut, all of Rhode Island under flood watches right now, all of Long Island under flood watches. Here's a look at the high-res future radar. You're going to see this thing just veer back a little bit like this, back toward Long Island over the next, say, maybe about 18 hours or so. So potentially making landfall maybe right out there at the edge of Montauk. Could be making landfall near Bridgeport, coastal Rhode Island as well. Be very concerned about what could happen for us with storm surge there coming into Rhode Island. But ultimately, look at all the heavy rain. Right now, the model's predicting west side or left side loaded heavy rain. So now New York, Newark, Poughkeepsie, up toward maybe Sagatuck, Hartford. These are all places that get hammered. Greenwich, Danbury, Danbury all get hit hard here. And even back down toward Philadelphia, coming back in around Trenton, we could get hit pretty hard here. So likely flooding highlighted here in yellow. So that'll be Springfield, Massachusetts, all the way back down to the Jersey Shore here, the central Jersey Shore here. Then notice if you go Monday into Tuesday, and Justin was talking about this. Now then, a slow drift back to the east again, and maybe a little bit farther north. So now we're talking about rain coming up into Vermont, New Hampshire. I know you're gun shy after what happened with previous storms and all the flooding we saw about a decade ago with Irene. Be ready for this. The heaviest stuff looks to be south of you, though, Vermont, and that's maybe good news for you, as we won't get into the really rugged terrain. But nonetheless, look at the rain here. 3 to 5 inches in a lot of places. Those soaking rains, they're going to really soak the trees. They're already pre-saturated because of what happened with Fred. Then those winds come along. All the trees are leafed out. The trees come down. Look at all the trees we have here in the Northeast. It's a recipe for disaster. Be prepared for power outages.
When you order carry-out, choose...
When it comes to covering the most important issue facing us and our Earth, one day does make all the difference. Now, the Weather Channel and its innovative climate team at Pattern are connecting you every day to the most fascinating stories impacting our planet. For what's now and what's next, rely on the climate experts with the most trusted name in TV news. If it's out there, it's in here. The Weather Channel.
The bottom line is take time now. Change your plans for tomorrow if you have to. Prepare if you're in someplace prone to flooding. Take whatever steps you can. Prepare. We'll constantly update you. If you have belongings outside that might fly around in high winds, please secure them now. And then tomorrow, keep an eye on neighbors, loved ones, see if they need anything. Provide that support.
That is New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio urging residents to prepare for Hurricane Henri as soon as possible. The window to prepare is dwindling down. You want to take any loose limbs, any lawn furniture, bring it indoors, closer to your home so it does not end up next door or in your neighbor's backyard. But you also heard him say preparations also include checking on your neighbors. Welcome back into the Weather Channel's extended coverage of Henri. I'm meteorologist Evan Wooten live for you in Montauk, New York. We are on the easternmost point of Long Island. Island, one area that perhaps may see the strongest or the hardest brunt coming in from Henri. We're anticipating another high tide just around 8 o'clock this afternoon, so that will give us a good estimate as to how high the water will start to progress. Earlier this morning when we had high tide, the water was just about, I would say, 15 yards or so away. However, the ocean, as you can see, is much more angry now that the waves have started to kick up and some of the winds, too, have picked up in response to that pressure drop from Henri. So as the waves pick up more and more and more, you will hear the churn, you will hear the crashing of the waves. This is something that is not always like this. I was talking, every single resident I've talked to, worker that works at some of the beach shacks and some of the restaurants, have all said it is normally much more still and far more quiet. But because the wind has picked up, which we've really seen progress all day long, so have the waves. So what will be some of the impacts here? I mentioned that high tide coming along 8 o'clock this evening. We do have low tide overnight, but then the next high tide does come in right around 8:15 tomorrow morning. Now, low tide is actually 2 o'clock in the evening tomorrow. So guess what? As the strongest core of Henri is approaching right around 2 o'clock, if that landfall does hold right around 2 o'clock, we may actually see a little bit of a break. However, the coupling of the heavy rainfall, the coupling of that push of water coming in, and all the water that wants to drain out will certainly start to lead to a flash flood threat. We want to get to storm specialist and a hurricane specialist and hurricane expert, rather, Dr. Rick Knabb, former National Hurricane Center director. And Dr. Knabb, we want to bring you in to talk more about not just the storm surge threat, but also the rip current risk, too, that will exist today, tomorrow, and even in the hours after Henri has pulled out.
Yeah, so true, Tevin. And from where you're standing, way to the south, way down the east coast of the U.S., all the way to Florida, Henri is kicking up the swells that are making for a high rip current risk all the way up and down the East Coast, with just a few breaks in there with less vulnerable areas. But most of you, it's a dangerous, dangerous day at the beach, especially where the weather isn't all that bad. Say on the Delmarva, for example, not too bad of weather right now, but the swells are pounding in, and the rip currents and the rough surf could take lives if you don't listen to the lifeguards. So don't swim at any unguarded beaches. Stay out of the water if they instruct you to do so. Look at all these areas at moderate to high risk of rip currents today. And as Tevin said, this is going to be a problem for the rest of the weekend, even into early next week up in the Northeast. Now, we're going to talk about storm surge, and when the winds arrive, expected to be tomorrow morning here in southern New England. That is relevant to the storm surge issue because you want to be out of your, evacuation zones, according to local officials' instructions, before those winds of tropical storm force arrive. So you got tonight to adhere to those instructions and get to your safe place tonight in this storm surge warning area. And you notice that storm surge warning goes west and east of the track because we could have the flow into Long Island Sound and then the flow into the beaches here from Montauk eastward. Now, let's take a look at, I want to emphasize what Tevin was saying about the tide. The low tide could be very early Sunday morning, but then we could have a high tide Sunday morning, say around 9:30 in the morning. Over at Falmouth, high tide tomorrow morning, Sunday morning at 8:30. So let's look at the way the GFS has it at around 9 o'clock in the morning. Watch this. So here's around 9 a.m. Even though landfall might not have occurred yet, the onshore push will be strong into a place like Falmouth and on the north side into Montauk. So this is one of those times when you could have the high astronomical tide contributing along with the onshore push, and that's when both effects could combine to get to that 3, 4, or 5 feet of storm surge flooding above normally dry ground. And even after landfall, you're still going to have a strong onshore push. So this will be a long duration wind, storm surge, and rainfall event. We're going to talk about the inland impacts when the Weather Channel's coverage of Hurricane Henri continues.
Tired of clean clothes?
So here's the scene. This is in Rhode Island. Yep, they are boarding up, people preparing for the arrival of Hurricane Henri. Homes and businesses preparing right now, and it's a lot of work, too. Up go the shutters, right? But they're doing it the right way here. No tape, folks. We don't want any tape on those windows. Storm shutters or plywood is all you should be using. Let's update you on what we know at this hour. The governors of Connecticut, New York, and Rhode Island have all declared states of emergency. So has the mayor of New York City. New York has called up 500 members of its National Guard, while Massachusetts has activated 1,000 to assist with flooding, rescues, and debris cleanup. Connecticut's Emergency Operations Center has been partially activated, will be fully activated tomorrow morning. Shelters will require everyone to wear masks, and FEMA reminds those who may experience power outages, keep generators outdoors and away from buildings. Let's bring in our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, for the very latest on Henri here. Dr. Knabb, the time, time is running out here truly to prepare, because tomorrow the weather goes downhill very quickly.
Yeah, and it's going to do so probably earlier than most people would want to get up. So I would get all your supplies, get out of evacuation zones if instructed, get to your safe place for the duration of the storm, wherever it is you go to sleep tonight, because when you wake up tomorrow, the weather will be getting really nasty, really early and really quickly and abruptly. 75-mile-an-hour hurricane and moving north-northeast at 18, but it's not going to keep moving fast. It's going to move relatively quickly until it gets here. Isn't that convenient? Then it's going to slow down and meander and maybe even stall at times and spend a day and a half, 2 days over New England. We hate these slow movers, but at least we have some time tonight to get ready before it does its ups and downs along the way. In either way, probably making landfall very close to the tropical storm hurricane threshold, and that's why the hurricane warnings are still up. Tropical storm warnings up around that, including for New York City, for Providence, for Hartford. This is not just going to be a beachfront wind event. Okay, we got to get ready for the winds inland. Now, at the coast, that's when the winds of tropical storm force probably arriving early tomorrow morning, and then midday afternoon a little farther inland here in southern New England. That's when you want to be indoors, off the roads, and hunkering down for the duration of the storm. And once that wind starts tomorrow morning, so will the rain. And tomorrow night into Monday morning, very likely to have flash flooding somewhere in this yellow area. It does include some big cities like New York City and Hartford and Springfield and Albany, New York. But look at the possible flash flooding going way inland. So this is going to be a larger storm when it arrives and sits over New England than it is now. And it's going to be slower moving than it is now. That's why the rainfall totals are really going to add up, and we're going to have inland flooding. The other big water problem, of course, is the saltwater flooding. We still have the storm surge warning all of Long Island Sound from LaGuardia eastward, and here it comes. And if you look on the visible imagery, it's got several more hours before it crosses the north wall of the Gulf Stream. So, Mike, it'll be really interesting to see how strong it gets tonight, because it's looking a little bit healthier in recent satellite images.
All right, Dr. Knabb, I have specific questions about that. I'm going to hold off on those for now, because I want to get to Justin Michaels. He's live in Boston this evening. Justin, we've seen what the hurricane is doing right now. We know what the track is at this point. For Bostonians, what should they be doing right now?
Well, you know, as we always say, Mike, preparation is key. Having those hurricane plans ready, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane, doesn't matter, because we do know, no matter what the storm does over the next couple hours, we do know that over the next couple days, it's eventually going to make its way this way. And that's after that really sharp eastward shift Monday into Tuesday is when we're really going to see maybe worse impacts than what we're going to experience Sunday into Monday. I'll show you what, though. There are plenty of boats still out in Boston Harbor, including the Common Calypso there. That is a boat that has probably seen some storms. Take a look at that big sucker sitting out there. And you know what they're probably doing? I would imagine, and this is just me guessing, just kind of knowing what they do in the world of maritime, they're probably going to be taking boats like that, ships like that, out to sea just to get them out of harbor, get them off the dock, because they're dangerous in dock. Out in sea, just a couple miles offshore, they can often sit there and weather the storm. I can't guarantee it, but I would almost bet that's what they're doing with that boat, and probably some of the other cargo boats that are back in Boston Harbor. So again, the timing here, tomorrow morning around 2 o'clock, you're going to see the rain start to come down. The winds are going to start to whip up as we have Henri coming ashore and starting to make a mess of New England. Then eventually it's going to make that really sharp turn to the east and come back this way. Remember, Monday into Tuesday. That needs to be in Bostonians' minds and people here in eastern Massachusetts when it could be an even bigger issue. Power outages could also be an issue. As the rain's coming down, winds changing direction, limbs come down. Just be ready for the next couple days, folks. It's going to be tumultuous, and the Weather Channel has you covered to keep you safe all day and all night through the storm.
We're back.
If you know you are in an area that tends to flood, if you know you are in a tidal area that tends to flood, if you know you are in an area that is subject to tidal surges, get out of that area now, please, and get to another and better place of safety.
You know, historically, water has taken the most lives in landfalling tropical systems in the United States. A lot of that storm surge and a lot of that inland flooding from rainfall. Staying out of the water is one of the best ways to ensure your safety, and that includes not driving onto any water-covered roads. And these flood watches, look at the millions of people that are in this flood watch zone. And this one means business because this is going to be a slow mover. Now, you already have a little bit of rain in association with the trough that's pulling Henri northward, along with Henri's moisture. So there's some chance of flash flooding overnight tonight in New York City, Philly, getting down close to Baltimore. But that's just the beginning because the system could get a little bit stronger. And then when it comes ashore as somewhere tropical storm, hurricane threshold, then it's going to slow down. Then it becomes a category slow storm. And once the winds of Tropical Storm 4 start arriving in southern New England tomorrow morning, so will the rains. And that means tomorrow, as the storm slows down, right when it's arriving, tomorrow night, into Monday morning, likely flash flooding. And some of this could end up being kind of community-wide flooding. And you're going to want to not only stay off the roads, be sheltering indoors because of the wind, but looking out for those flash flood warnings. Have a way to get the warnings on your mobile device. Have a NOAA weather radio. And this problem continues into Monday night and Tuesday, and this risk could go way up. We're still a couple days away. The Weather Prediction Center might not be able to zero in on the greatest risk yet, but the risk could go up. Watch again what the Euromodel continues to do in interior New England, with several inches of rainfall falling over a large area. That's a lot of water that could cause a lot of flooding. And GFS is a very similar sort of flavor to it. Take a look at the latest Euro. Once it comes ashore tomorrow morning, look at that leftward bend. And it doesn't move maybe more 2, 3, 4 miles an hour during this time. Barely moves as we get into Monday. And then finally Tuesday, it's on the way out. So some things that you can be doing to get ready for potential flooding is maybe get sandbags, clear those gutters, put valuables in waterproof containers, raise your electronics and furniture if you're in one of those flood-prone areas the governor was talking about. Take photos, videos of your interior in case you have a flood insurance claim, and make some backups of those computer data. Mike, water can do a tremendous amount of damage.
Yes, it can. And all those things you could do tonight. I know it's time consuming, it's tedious, it's something you don't want to be doing, but it can save you a lot of hassle in the long run, that's for sure. So Dr. Knapp's got some great advice there. I want to walk you through the forecast here, kind of city by city, give you an idea of what to anticipate here. So a place like Hartford, and I know we're a little bit inland here, but I think it's going to be a pretty hard hit for Hartford. 30-mile-per-hour gusts happen for us beginning tomorrow morning, not likely ending for about 24 hours later. 50-mile-per-hour gusts tomorrow night as we get a little bit of a westerly jog, we believe now, with Henri. 2 to 3 inches still to come. May depend exactly when it then wants to turn back east if we get a little bit more than that. So let's take you through the future radar here. Now starting to get those outer bands starting to hit us here. Connecticut, out here through, say, Rhode Island, and then down through Long Island as well. That's 4 o'clock in the morning. Rain's now moving in. Now here we're looking at potentially northern eye wall if that really comes together around maybe 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. Then in comes the center. It's going to be right about here at noontime tomorrow. Big time rain now hitting us through Connecticut, up into Massachusetts at this point. And there's a look at 11 a.m. with the system sitting literally almost right on top of Montauk at this point. But you're now getting some pretty good wind and surge coming up through, say, New Bedford and Compton and Mystic and Newport, New Bedford, over toward New London. These are all places where you're really going to get hit hard here. And then the winds 50, 60 miles an hour with the heavy rain could bring down some trees and power lines, anticipating a high number of people to lose power. By Sunday morning, wind shift out of a different direction, but still very breezy, 20 to 25 miles per hour. For New Haven, 30-mile-per-hour gusts begin tomorrow morning, last for about a day. 50-mile-per-hour gusts begin tomorrow late afternoon and evening. I think it could get really rough for you, and as much as 5 inches of rain is coming your way. Again, flooding becomes an issue. Trees coming down because of weakened root systems, also a major concern. Well, let's take you to Montauk. Now, let's get you out there with our Tevin Wooten tonight. Tevin, you could be ground zero for a landfall.
Mike, certainly could be ground zero for landfall from Hurricane Henri. I'm meteorologist Tevin Wooten live in Montauk, New York, and take a look at how high these waves are. Folks, this is still about 30 hours removed or about 20 hours removed from the onset of the heaviest activity coming along with Henri, and the waves are already crashing in so high. This is a scene that we will see get worse and worse and worse and worse with time, so much so that where a lot of the people are standing, they would be encompassed in water by the time Henri got here. So this is why you need to heed the warnings from emergency management officials and first responders. We have this storm covered for you from multiple angles from here in New York State into portions of Massachusetts and Connecticut as well. Stay tuned to the Weather Channel.
What's so extreme about the deep?
Well, Henri is not the only tropical threat we've been watching. Hurricane Grace made its second landfall earlier today in Mexico as a high-end Category 3 hurricane, almost a Category 4. Now, the mountains of Mexico have taken their toll. It's now weakening as it moves inland, bringing a threat of rain and damaging winds. Rainfall totals 6 to 12 inches, even locally up to 18 inches are possible even from this point forward. Let's take a look at what Grace did yesterday. Rapid intensification right near the coastline. Now, this was the first landfall on Yucatan. And then it weakened over Yucatan down to a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm. And while Henri was making its turn, look what Grace did. Rapidly intensified to a hurricane and then to a major hurricane. It was strengthening all the way up until final landfall here on the mainland of Mexico. Let's run that one more time. Look at that intensification over the southwestern Gulf. And then, as fast as it strengthened, it weakened very quickly. But what a hit, unfortunately, for our friends down in Mexico. And interestingly, after making landfall as a high-end Category 3 around 1 a.m. Central this morning, the mid-level remnants, of which the Hurricane Center has written their last advisory on, are going to continue over Mexico and maybe contribute to development on the East Pacific side in the next few days. Now, I would not get the name Grace because it isn't the low-level remnants, but part of Grace is going to contribute to things going on in the East Pacific. Really feel bad for our folks down in Mexico and hope everybody can recover as quickly as possible. Henri is not going to be as strong as Grace was at landfall, but there still could be some strengthening tonight. And Grace just reminds us that intensity forecasts are far from perfect. This could get a little bit stronger than the actual forecast from the Hurricane Center. It's got several more hours over the warm waters of the Gulf Stream. And then even after that, it could peak at a hurricane 80 miles an hour, plus or minus from that. And then it will weaken over the cooler waters, but will it weaken fast enough such that it's no longer a hurricane when it makes landfall? We don't know that for sure, but it'll be right near that tropical storm hurricane threshold. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two. And then it will slow down and become a category slow storm with a long duration of wind, storm surge and waves, and rain-induced flooding. This is not just going to be a coastal event, but we do have the hurricane warnings here in southern New England. Tropical storm warnings going inland from there quite a bit. New York City, Hartford, Providence, under tropical storm warnings. The tropical storm conditions and the heavy rain will start before landfall tomorrow morning, about the time you'd want to get up, and then begins the big inland flood event, Mike, that I'm really concerned about.
A lot of people should be concerned about that, Dr. Knapp, no question. Nice detailed analysis of what's happening, even with Grace. Wow, what a storm that was, right? We certainly can't stress enough that now really is the time to prepare ahead of Henri's arrival here in the Northeast. Here in New London, Connecticut, people bringing in their boats, getting them out of the water. There's a hurricane storm surge warning in effect for this area. And a place like New London, now you may be in the direct path of the center of this. It could get really, really rough with storm surge, with high winds, with flooding rain. You might end up getting it all, unfortunately. So what should you be doing like right now, before it gets dark tonight? What can you still do? Anything that you might have outside in the backyard, front yard, bring that in. Grills and cooking equipment, your plants, planters, outside tools that you might have, pool equipment, toys, patio furniture, all those things need to come inside. At the very least, just put them in your garage. But it's going to be a very windy day tomorrow that a lot of stuff could get blown around. Now, as far as power outages go, in the purple area here, so that will include a place like New London. It will include a place like Montauk, Islip, Hamptons. It'll include Narragansett. It'll include Mystic over toward Narragansett Bay here. All the westerly, these are all places where widespread power outages are going to happen for you. Likely to go all the way up here through Massachusetts, and possible outages up toward maybe Keene or Albany, New York. So operate your generator outside. Do not use candles or any open flames. That's a fire hazard. Stay away from any downed power lines. Give yourself at least 30 feet from those downed power lines, and call 911 if you see a power line that's gone down. Have a plan for life-sustaining medical equipment here so that they can keep operating in case of an outage. And then again, that would be a generator, but operate only outside, not in a garage with the exhaust pointed away from your home. Well, let's get you to Justin Michaels. He is in Boston for us tonight, where Boston also, and I know, Justin, a lot of people thinking, oh, we're on the far edge of the cone. We're going to get hit hard in Boston.
Yeah. Well, there's always impacts outside of the cone, and there's always impacts after the storm comes ashore, and that's going to happen here. Because remember, though much of the impacts of this storm are going to be over the next 48 hours, 36 hours, here it's going to be Monday into Tuesday. So have that in your minds, and remember, with those changing winds and just how saturated everything is here in Massachusetts and much of New England over the last weeks, they're going to have lots of problems, potentially trees down, limbs down, power outages is what that means. The Weather Channel has you covered, as always, through the storm. Stay tuned.
Time is running out to prepare as Hurricane Henri closes in on the Northeast. Landfall comes tomorrow as strong winds, dangerous storm surge, and flooding will all bring significant threats for the coast. All of this coming just days after Fred's remnants left widespread flooding across the Northeast. We have live team coverage with Tevin Wooten in Long Island, New York, Justin Michaels in Boston, Massachusetts. But let's get right to our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knapp, for the newest advisory and what we can anticipate in the next 24 hours. Dr. Knapp.
Mike, Henri is still a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane, but it still appears poised to strengthen over the next several hours as it is still over warm water. Inner core is trying to get a little more organized, and it will be early tomorrow morning when it gets to cooler water. So there's still this window of opportunity for it to strengthen. Also, interestingly, it's moving pretty quickly right now. And you might be thinking, oh, good, we got a fast mover. It's going to be one of those New England hurricanes in and out of here in a hurry. I wish that was the case, because it's going to be moving quickly until it arrives tomorrow, and then it's going to slow down dramatically as it gets caught underneath this upper level low, and the high latitude ridge blocks its northward motion. Either way, with the ups and downs and intensity that we might see, it's probably going to come ashore sometime tomorrow afternoon, right near the tropical storm hurricane threshold. After that, weaken pretty quickly, but moving very slowly, and it'll be a horizontally large system. Large, slow-moving systems mean a long duration of wind, storm surge, waves, and rain-induced flooding. Hurricane warnings didn't change. Neither did the tropical storm warnings at 5 p.m. these are the areas where you need to be sheltering from the wind. And you want to get to that safe place wherever it is you're going to sleep tonight, because early tomorrow morning is when those winds of tropical storm force will likely start arriving, and you don't want to be outside during that time. You don't want to be getting supplies. You want to do all that tonight. So tonight is prep time, and then get to your safe place when you go to bed tonight. And then during the day tomorrow, the tropical storm conditions will begin arriving inland even before the center of circulation comes ashore. It's not just a point on the map. Storm surge warning still in effect all the way from near LaGuardia Airport, all of Long Island Sound, all the way out to south-facing portions of Cape Cod and most of Long Island's south-facing shore. Any local officials tell you to evacuate, you got to listen to those instructions and get out tonight, because again, those conditions go downhill tomorrow morning. And then after the winds and the rains start arriving tomorrow morning, they're going to last for a long time, and the slow-moving large system is going to drop a lot of rain tomorrow night into Monday morning. This is just day number 1 of what is likely to be a significant inland flood event for the northeastern United States. And when you combine moist soils and heavy rain with the strong winds, a lot of trees are likely to come down. Here's that trough over the eastern U.S. that's bringing Henri northward, but it's going to get trapped within that low south of this big developing ridge. And if you look at the hurricane on visible imagery, it looks healthier than it does on the infrared, and it will not be crossing the north wall of the Gulf Stream for another several hours. So it's got a lot of fuel to tap into. And let's zoom into this really closely, because we have the high resolution, super high res in time and space satellite imagery, and I'm going to go way in, and you'll see the center of circulation is up in here, and you've got an inner core that's trying to get its act together. This is the part that could spin up, but we've got a lot of thunderstorm activity coiling around this thing. It's expanding, and Mike, this is going to be a large, slow-moving rainmaker. Those overshooting tops show you just how much this is capable of bringing heavy rain once this comes ashore.
Dr. Knapp, I wanted to ask you about the ocean, the sea surface temperatures, the ocean temperatures. You're still a little nose of warm Gulf Stream temperatures there. Will that make a difference at all?
Oh, absolutely, because those water temperatures are not just warm, they're really warm. I mean, like mid to upper 80s in that north wall of the Gulf Stream. And so even after it passes north of that north wall of the Gulf Stream, it will still have tapped into that energy, and there could be a lag, so it could peak in intensity even a little bit after that. Now, these waters are cooler, and that will prevent strengthening, but they're not so cold that it's going to make it just fall apart, Mike.
So would that have any effect, say, on the storm surge we would see?
Well, yes, in that once it starts weakening after it crosses the north wall of the Gulf Stream, then it will get horizontally larger. When hurricanes weaken, they tend to get larger. And a larger storm that's a little bit weaker is just as capable, if not more capable, of bringing storm surge and waves to a larger number of people on both sides of the track.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Dr. Knapp, thanks so much. Appreciate you humoring me on the questions there.
Absolutely.
But let's get to Tevin Wooten tonight. He's in Montauk, far eastern end of Long Island. Tevin, if we looked at the modeling here, the high res, what the forecast cone is, it looks like Montauk could be dead center of landfall.
Absolutely, Mike. We are bracing for the worst of what Henri will bring here to the easternmost point of Long Island. That is where we are right now, live for you in Montauk, New York. What we're seeing right now, the surge, the moisture surge ahead of Henri. And look at how the visibility has been greatly reduced just within the last 1 or 2 hours or so. We are seeing the condensation process in action. So how do clouds form? When the temperature meets the dew points, that's when you start to moisten up the environment here. The temperature right now, 77 degrees. The dew point right now, or measure of moisture in the atmosphere, 73 degrees. So 77 over 73. And as we start to cool down, ultimately we get closer and closer to meeting condensation. So that's what's happening right now in terms of some of the moisture in the atmosphere. And there is a lot of moisture surging in. So much so, though, it's a bit harder to see some of these waves crashing in right now. And this is a sight, folks, I will tell you, we got here yesterday. It was not like this last night. And then this morning, as I was waking up across the street, I was able to actually hear the waves, the wall of water crashing onto the shore. And now this entire area, as we start to approach high tide here, right around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock this evening, is starting to take on more and more water. The storm still about 300 miles to the south and southeast. Ultimately, though, as that storm pulls closer and closer and closer, this water will actually start to get closer and closer and closer to some of the homes here, the condos, the businesses here. That is why we do have the dunes, and hopefully those will hold, and hopefully those will be protection. But even without high tide, the water's right here. And guess what? We got about 40 to 60 yards worth of dunes between myself and the camera, which is where a lot of the condos are. But there are several spots along this beach where the dunes are maybe 4 to 6 feet away. So, Mike, we are quite literally starting to see that push of water take over the beach here on Long Island. Mike?
Yeah, and it's going to get significantly worse tomorrow. Thanks for the update, Evan. Now, as Henri approaches, people in the Northeast probably thinking about scenes they saw a year ago. And that is when Isaias ripped through the Northeast and tore down thousands of trees in the process. First, though, it saturated the ground with the pounding rain. Then the second blow with that wind, and it just uprooted so many trees. Extensive power outages across the Northeast. And remember, Isaias made landfall in the Southeast. Outages anticipated right now with Hurricane Henri.
We believe Henri has the potential for significant and lengthy outages. We have about 1.25 million electric customers in Connecticut. Unfortunately, we're estimating that between 30 and 49% of them could lose power, and restoration could take anywhere from 5 to 10 days for some customers. So yes, we have mobilized all available resources. We've reached out across the country for additional utility crews. As I said, this is unprecedented. 4,000 plus utility crews in Connecticut. We've never had as large a contingent as we will have for this storm.
All right, so let's bring Dr. Knabb back in to talk more about this. Dr. Knabb, we heard him say there that maybe on the high end, roughly half of their customers could lose power there with Eversource. That would be 500,000 plus customers. This could be very impactful for a lot of people.
Yeah, we are expecting widespread power outages where the winds are the strongest. Now, every storm is different, so it's not like we're saying that this is going to be exactly like Isaias where you live in particular. Some of you might get worse winds. Some of you might get not as bad, depending on exactly where you live. But the potential is there with the moist soils and the strong winds that this large storm is going to generate, and the fully leafed trees. And regardless of whether or not it comes ashore as a 70-mile-an-hour storm or a 75-mile-an-hour hurricane, for the majority of the time after landfall, we're going to be dealing with a large, slow-moving tropical storm that's going to affect millions. And the winds are going to start at the coast tomorrow morning. So you want to get to your safe place, wherever it is you're going to sleep tonight, because when you wake up tomorrow, that's when the winds are really going to pick up. And this is not just going to be a beachfront wind event. Look at how far inland and west of track and east of track the tropical storm warnings go. New York City, Hartford, Providence, both sides of the cone, inside, outside the cone. And look at the chances of winds of tropical storm force are 30, 40, 50% sustained in inland parts of New England over the next several days. And that's why the power outage potential goes so far inland. Yes, the most widespread outages be here near the core of the storm, but New York City all the way around to Boston, out on the Cape, possible power outages. And so you want to make sure you can get through a power outage safely. They can be surprisingly dangerous or even deadly if you're not smart, especially with those generators. Operate them outdoors. Don't use open flame, too much of a fire risk. Stay away from down power lines. And especially, Mike, we got to look after our elderly friends and family members, especially if they have life-sustaining medical equipment. Get them someplace that has backup power. Have them close to a medical facility. We lose too many of our elderly friends in storms and hurricanes.
Yes, we do. Always looking out for each other is a very important thing. Dr. Knabb, thank you for that. We want to take you to Boston, Massachusetts right now. The Weather Channel's Justin Michaels is there. Justin, tomorrow the weather will go downhill in Massachusetts, but we're really thinking that Boston, it may be delayed a day for the highest effects there.
I think so, and that's what we're kind of tracking. You're going to see the thing come ashore, and people today have been saying, hey, it's nowhere near us, it's not going to impact us. Well, that's not necessarily true, because you watch that track, and even with layman's eyes, you can see that that thing's going to cut to the east and come back right over the greater Boston area. So rain is going to begin here tomorrow morning, probably around 2. Winds are going to pick up, but the bulk of the energy and the storm that we're going to be really feeling here in the greater Boston area and is when it's going to be coming across Massachusetts and then going back out into the Atlantic. And that's going to be Monday into Tuesday. So have in your minds for planning that it's not really going to be as impactful early as it is going to be later. Follow me this way, and you can see people here are not really doing too much planning. They're, in fact, Mark Zoni behind the lens. I mean, take a look at some of the yachts that are sitting in this harbor. You got to love Boston Harbor with all the yachts. But also, there are boats moored out in Boston Harbor. Mark, you can just pan around and show everybody the beautiful view that is Boston Harbor. Over here, sailboats. And what's very interesting is there are people who live in those sailboats 365 days a year. Not all of them, but some of them. So the fact that they're still there shows that at least these sailors aren't too concerned. Now, of course, they could leave tomorrow. That's certainly a possibility. And we'll have to see if they do that. But the main effects really here are going to be Monday into Tuesday. Another issue, and if you look at the storm surge forecast that's coming to the south, you're going to see that 3 to 5 feet. Up here in Boston Harbor, literally right where we are, we're talking about a 1 to 2 foot storm surge. Follow me this way, and you'll see why that's probably not going to be too much of an issue. Mark, follow me right over here. This is not a bad view of just how high the seawall is here in Boston Harbor, just to get up to this level. So 1 to 2 feet of water won't be too big of a deal for that seawall. Where areas are lower than that and closer to the water line, certainly going to be an issue. But here in Boston Harbor, probably not so much. And remember, to put things into perspective, this area does see king tides. And believe it or not, with a king tide, there will be water right where I'm standing. And that typically happens later in the year, Mike. So, you know, the impacts early, not so bad. Later, we'll have to see. And Mike, another big issue going to be here. Remember, just west of the city, you get outside of the city, the tree canopy is enormous here in the greater Boston area. So it's also very saturated ground. With the changing wind directions, with the rain that's coming down, maybe 2-3 inches of rain, could we see power outages here as trees and limbs come down? Absolutely possible. Mike, into you.
And it's one of the fears that we have here is that trees will come down on homes, people will lose power. It's going to be at the very least, it's going to be inconvenient for some. It could be life-threatening. Justin, thank you very much. Appreciate the detailed look there at the harbor when we take a look at the water. Now, there's going to be another issue with the water, and that's going to be the rain from Henri. We think it could be very heavy at times. A lot of flood watches and flash flood watches have been issued. So all of New Jersey, but Philadelphia is included. Trenton, and now you're thinking Philadelphia, how are we going to feel anything from Henri when it makes landfall way past us? Well, keep in mind, we're anticipating a westerly turn. We could get a lot of flow of rain that comes down toward Allentown and Philly and Trenton. Be ready for that. Then notice, this is going to be the high-resolution computer model. Look at the system kind of nudge just a little bit west as we go through Sunday. Potential landfall here, eastern Long Island. Good surge of water, unfortunately. So coastal Massachusetts, Rhode Island, right up through up to Providence, you're going to see water rise over toward Bridgeport. And then notice all that heavy rain that comes in for us here on that western side. And this is why we think that, again, notice this rain that comes back down through Scranton and the Lehigh Valley, Newark, New York. These are all places where you've got a likelihood of flooding to occur. Everyone in yellow here. So Springfield, Massachusetts, Hartford, New Haven, New York, all of Long Island, Newark, up through the Hudson Valley. These are all places where it's going to rain, and it's going to rain a lot. Then fast forward another day, Monday into Tuesday. Let's expand that a little bit. The rain may come down in intensity, but now you're talking about a little bit more mountainous terrain here, which becomes a very big issue. We've seen this play out in previous tropical systems where now flash flooding, mudslides become a bigger problem. So rainfall forecast in total, some really heavy rain, 3 to 5 inches here. That could include the tri-state area specifically. For Springfield, 20-mile-per-hour gusts begin for you tomorrow morning, but 45-mile-per-hour gusts and higher through Sunday night and beyond. 2 to 3 inches of rain for you. Hartford, 50-mile-per-hour gusts by Sunday night. 2 to 3 inches of rain is coming your way. Stick around. We've got a lot more coverage to come here on the Weather Show. Don't forget, Roku, Fire Stick TV. You can watch us live.
When it comes to covering the most important issue facing us and our Earth, one day does make all the difference. Now, the Weather Channel and its innovative climate team at Pattern are connecting you every day to the most fascinating stories impacting our planet. For what's now and what's next, rely on the climate experts with the most trusted name in TV news. If it's out there, it's in here. The Weather Channel.
Well, New York is bracing as Hurricane Henri approaches. The mayor has declared a state of emergency. And joining us now to help bring us up to date on how the city is preparing is New York's Director of Office of Emergency Response Preparedness, Kevin Wisely. Kevin, thanks for being with us. So what's the latest? What is the city doing right now? What are you urging your residents to do?
So the city and the state continue to prepare. The utilities in the state of New York have been preparing for the last several days for once the models came into focus and the impact was going to be in the city and Long Island. So the New York State utilities have been working on ensuring they bring in additional line and tree and service and damage assessment crews to be ready to respond immediately upon impact of Henri.
Kevin, then let's talk about the flood potential here, right? Some very heavy rain that comes up through the Hudson Valley. How do you deal with that?
So certainly the utilities need to be very prepared with the rising waters and be cognizant of that. We certainly have to message. They have preparation activities that they've done, things that have been put in place since Sandy that help protect substations, generating stations, and gas infrastructure.
What would you recommend that individual homeowners do at this point? Here we are less than 24 hours from a landfall.
Well, it's really important, and to continue to emphasize the information that you folks have been providing. Charge your mobile phones, your tablets, any communication device that you utilize. It's important to have a battery-operated radio, fresh batteries, so that you can receive vital information, safety alerts, any evacuations that may transpire, so you get that information. Check your supply of flashlights and blankets, non-perishable food and bottled water. And to really remember, though, in this event with the rising waters, the heavy winds, we're going to have downed wires and downed trees. Always treat downed wires as live, stay away, call 911. And also, remember, electric current passes very easily through water. So be very cognizant of large ponding water, especially with wires down. So it's really about understanding your surroundings, paying attention to your surroundings, and being prepared ahead of time.
Always wise. Kevin Wisely, thanks so much for being with us, and best of luck to you, and stay safe.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
And we know that now more than ever, people are certainly concerned about the potential effects from the storm and the possible power outages and extended power outages. While a portable generator may keep a refrigerator and maybe a few small appliances running, there are safety issues if they're not operated properly. But now there's a better way to power your home after a power outage. Jim Cantori met with Kohler home improvement expert Ed De La Grande to see the future of home generators.
We had a record number of billion-dollar weather disasters last year, and having an emergency preparedness kit for a few days sometimes just doesn't cut it. Let's talk about adding a generator to your arsenal. Ed, there are generators and there are generators.
Yes, there are.
What's the benefit of having a generator?
Well, the big benefit, let's face it, we now live in a plugged-in society. Just about everything we use requires electricity. So your best defense is having a backup generator system.
So what are the differences?
Well, the big difference is there's a portable and a standby. The portable generators are great for things like camping and tailgating, and in a pinch, they'll run a few appliances in your house. Now, remember, with a portable one, you do have to refuel them. They run on gasoline. Right. And you also have to make sure you run it outside away from the house. So you do have to do some constant care on it throughout the event. With a standby generator, you don't have any of those concerns. These things are permanently installed to the home's electrical system. They come on automatically, and they could power up the entire house, not just a few circuits.
And being able to stay in your home and make repairs to your home, isn't that almost like having the comforts of home, even though you have to put up with that?
Absolutely. And a standby generator is like your own personal power plant in your backyard. Now, natural gas is great. It'll hook right up to your gas lines. If you don't have natural gas, you could use propane gas. And if you use propane gas, I recommend at least a 500-gallon tank.
All right, so you sold me on a standby, something like this. What's the first thing I need to do?
First thing you do, contact the local dealer. They're all over the country. They'll come down, do what's called a site visit. At the site visit, they'll locate it, see all the local codes, install it to the local codes, and they'll even service it for you. This is not a do-it-yourself project.
You lose power, you got power now to power your house.
Absolutely.
That's a win, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
So when could the winds of Henri start to take out power? Well, it's not a risk that's going to start when the center comes ashore. That would be tomorrow afternoon. No, this is not just a point on the map. The winds of tropical storm force will arrive before that, probably around the time you might be getting up tomorrow morning. So you want to get ready for those power outages before you go to bed tonight. Plus, we've got NOAA hurricane hunters about to fly through Henri. I'll tell you what they're finding when we come back.
Closes in on landfall, likely to be around lunchtime tomorrow. Today, really, though, is your last chance to prepare, with conditions expected to quickly deteriorate throughout the morning tomorrow and throughout the day. Here's what we know right now. FEMA has pre-positioned 700 response personnel, meals, tarps, generators. They're all there in advance of Henri making a landfall. Connecticut suspending bus service statewide starting at 2 a.m. It will not resume before Monday morning. Amtrak canceling train service between New York and Boston tomorrow. And in Suffolk County, New York, announcing voluntary evacuation from Fire Island. The last ferry will run at 10:40 p.m. tonight. Service will be suspended for the day tomorrow. Our hurricane expert, Dr. Rick Knabb, is with us tonight. Want to get to Dr. Knabb. And Dr. Knabb, you were the former Hurricane Center director, and a storm like this that's about to affect a highly populated area has always got to be a concern, and getting it just right, maybe in this case, isn't all that important. It's really what it does.
Yes, it's about conveying what the risks are, given not just the track and intensity forecast, but given the size of the storm as it will be moving over New England and the slow forward motion. So it's not all about landfall and how strong is it at landfall. It's about what happens before that and for a couple of days after that. And what the Hurricane Center director is doing continuously is briefing emergency managers, federal, state, even with the help of the local forecast offices, the Weather Service, the local emergency managers, so they can make evacuation decisions, prepare resources to deal with the power outages, the downed trees, and so forth. So there's a lot going on at the Hurricane Center, not just forecasting. This Cat 1 hurricane, 75 miles an hour. We're going to get an intermediate public advisory from the Hurricane Center in about an hour and a half. And one thing that you'll notice is that there's another spin in the atmosphere here. This mid to upper level low over the eastern U.S., that is what is moving Henri quickly northward today. And it's also contributing to the thunderstorms that we're seeing just offshore of New York City and New Jersey. But that's not really directly associated with Henri. It's certainly not the beginning of the tropical storm force winds. The center has several more hours over warm water before it crosses the north wall of the Gulf Stream. Water temperatures in the mid to upper 80s there. So there's still fuel to allow it to strengthen a little bit more. And on the visible imagery, you can see those overshooting tops as the sun goes down, and you can really get a sense for how much of it is popping.